Mario Kart is one of the most influential series in all of gaming. While it didn't invent the kart racing genre, the release of Super Mario Kart absolutely defined it. In the 3 decades since its release, the series has amassed a huge lineup, with each and every game being special to somebody out there. So imagine my surprise when I discovered a brand new Mario Kart game I'd never played. Mario Kart copycats are a dime a dozen. Many game series jumped at the chance to emulate Mario Kart's success, and often these games mix up the formula and give it their own twist. But then others, that'll be $59.99. Any company under the sun seems to be willing to take their intellectual property and throw them into a kart racer, whether it's good, bad, or barely functional. Hello Kitty Kruisers was a game released for smartphones in January of 2014, and just a few months later in March, had a console release for the Wii U. You can kinda tell the game was primarily a mobile game that they decided last minute to also throw on Wii U, because it had one of the smallest physical releases that you've ever seen. In fact, the physical prints were in such low supply that this game for a while became one of the holy grails for Wii U collectors, sometimes being bought for well over $200. The scarcity created some crazy news articles, and word of mouth spread about this randomly rare Hello Kitty game, and this caused the developers to jump at the opportunity. Hello Kitty Kruisers with Sanrio Friends released for the Switch in April 2018 in Europe and May 2018 in North America. But I think the developers missed the whole point of why this game was notable. Now, Hello Kitty is no stranger to licensed games. The IP is so popular all over the world that it would be a waste to not try. But honestly, they just shouldn't have tried. When I say this game is bland, I feel bad for the word bland. This gameplay is so slow and controls so poorly, I'm convinced that my controller is broken half the time. When you run through an item box, they didn't even bother pretending to have a little item roulette. A PNG of the item just appears in the corner. And you can really tell that this was a mobile game that they didn't improve graphically at all. I'm not even playing the game on my phone, this is just a YouTube video of the Switch version. The game has 3 basic modes. Quick Race has you jump into a race on any given track. Tournament is their version of Grand Prix mode, playing 4 races in a tour to earn the most points, and Adventure mode, which consists of a bunch of missions, which is the main way to unlock different karts. But there was zero creativity or extra effort put into Adventure mode. There are only 3 mission types. You either complete a time trial, collect cupcakes or apples or whatever, or race through all the rings. Not to brag, but it took me only 30 minutes to get through every single mission. Like, the amount of gameplay this game has is bad even by mobile game standards. For some reason, this game took inspiration from Diddy Kong Racing and gave 3 different types of vehicles: karts, planes, and boats. But it makes the same mistake that many games that offer different vehicles do. They're just kind of pointless. Diddy Kong Racing actually does something with the different vehicles, offering different mechanics and routes depending on your vehicle choice. In Hello Kitty, they do nothing outside of offer controls but I can go up and down, offer controls but the controls are even shittier. This genuinely feels like they were assigned this game 6 months ago and left it for the week before and just threw something together. The quality control is so bad. The AI at points is so stupid that nearly every other racer will get stuck on a wall and just never make any more progress for the rest of the race. And if you know what those AI are going through, that's impressive, because you do not want to touch walls in this game. You touch a wall and you're transported inside of a black hole to live out the rest of your days as string cheese. It feels like re-releasing this on the Switch was just a total misunderstanding of why people were buying this game on the Wii U. It wasn't the crazy gameplay people were having a blast with. It was just a collector's item, something rare people could brag about owning while it sits in the plastic wrap to literally never be played. Warped Kart Racers is another Mario Kart clone released for mobile devices, but dare I say, this one is actually kinda good. It features a crossover of 4 different Fox television brands: Family Guy, American Dad, King of the Hill, and Solar Opposites. It was released exclusively as a part of the Apple Arcade subscription service, so it has a bit higher of a quality standard than your average mobile game. The game doesn't even try to hide that it's a Mario Kart clone. It literally uses tortoise and clamshells for some of the items. I mean, it's really in your face. But if you consider the source material, most of the shows from this crossover are known for their use of parody, so I would expect nothing less than parodying Mario Kart in their literal Mario Kart clone game. Genuinely, I'm shocked at how good of a game this is, both as a Mario Kart game and a mobile game, especially after playing. It's a little surreal to be controlling a kart racer and having it feel both fluid and responsive, especially when you'd primarily play this on a touchscreen. But after a cup or two, I completely ignored that because I found out you can just play this game with a controller. Touch controls are generally inferior, so if the touch controls feel good, you know the standard controls will too. Frankly, if this game was released as a small console game, I'd probably pick it up knowing I'd have a good time. It kinda sucks it's stuck on a subscription service that's only found on iPhones. Warped Kart Racers really excels in character dialogue. Everyone has such silly little things to say, their dances and reactions, it just makes it feel more like you are actually playing as these characters. What adds to this are the fun references in the kart parts, and the maps are great representations of the worlds that these characters are from, even if the tracks themselves are a little basic. But I guess I can give them a pass for that, it's a phone game, so they can't be too complex. The campaign for the game has you go through their equivalent of Mario Kart CCs, but they further divide it into 4 missions for each property, allowing you to unlock racers and kart parts that come from that respective series. There are standard races, but there's also a battle mode similar to Mario Karts. And it has a multiplayer mode that actually has regular seasons with new content introduced. The only problem is you'll probably be playing against the same 5 other people who actively play this game online. Being a mobile game, you'd expect this to shove the microtransactions down your throat, but as a part of the Apple Arcade subscription service, this isn't the case. Apple Arcade goes against your typical mobile game setup. There are no ads and no microtransactions. Because of this, the gameplay and the gameplay loop feel a bit higher quality than some other mobile kart racers. You just get to play. You don't have to worry about not doing well in a certain challenge because you didn't spend real life money on a racer that's only available for 3 to 5 business days. Those types of games really build the gameplay around the microtransactions, while Warped Kart just kind of feels like they wanted to make a fun game. Truly, my only complaint with this game was the touch controls, and even then they were pretty good. And being able to use a PS5 controller just made my only complaint go away. Okay, but now it's time to stop playing a good game and start playing a great game. Garfield Kart. Garfield Kart was released for 3DS, smartphones, and PC back in 2013. What's the difference, you may ask? Absolutely nothing. I guess the 3DS version does have that second screen, but outside of that, these games are all the exact same game that play the exact same way. 6 years later, and I guess the developers found a way to squeeze just a little more out of perfection, because Garfield Kart Furious Racing was released for PC and modern consoles in November 2019. And they knew they made perfection because this game is literally just a remake of the original with prettier graphics. It has the same courses and racers as the original. You can play as Garfield, or John, or Odie, or this cat that eats garbage. And you can race in iconic locales such as the park, the city, and, Egypt. The game does use items in sort of a cool way. The Y and B buttons both handle items, with the Y button throwing them forward and the B button backward. But sometimes these items won't be thrown, they'll instead be used by your racer. With the spring item, for instance, you can throw it backwards and essentially use it as a banana peel from Mario Kart. But if you use the forward button, it will instead give you a hop that you can use to avoid items, grab collectibles, or access shortcuts. But playing it, I think maybe I changed my mind. This game is just sort of a forgettable clone. It's not horribly offensive to play, but it's just really not that great of a time either. FBI, open up! I would like to formally apologize for my previous statements. I've seen the error of my ways completely of my own free will, and I just want to state for the record that Garfield Kart is one of the greatest works of art that all of humanity has ever created. But once again, they went for even more perfection, just for us, the gamers. In Garfield Kart 2, All You Can Drift, the developers really streamlined everything. No need to worry about remapping your controls or adjusting the volume. Those options aren't here this time. No need to worry about rounding up a bunch of friends to play together because you can't host a private room. The gameplay isn't half bad, and luckily you don't need to be overwhelmed about learning a bunch of different tracks because there are even less in this game than in the original. And there's no need to stress about getting really good at online. You won't be finding anyone to play against. With all of the properties that Disney owns, it's no surprise that they throw them at any and every game opportunity they can. And the kart racer is no exception. Disney Speedstorm is a free-to-play kart racer featuring dozens of Disney characters. Basically, if you've seen them in Kingdom Hearts, there's a strong chance that they're already in this game or will show up later on, because a huge feature of this game is season passes. To no one's surprise, being free-to-play and being made by Disney, the game is rife with microtransactions. You can purchase characters, carts, and skins along with a loot box mechanic. I haven't dived too deep into the character comparisons, so I have no idea if this game ultimately becomes pay to win. But it's a Disney game, so it wouldn't surprise me. Ideally, it would operate like Fortnite, where your character, cart, skin all really don't matter that much, and your ability in the game is more important. But that doesn't seem to be the case because this game actually has kind of an intricate system. Each core driver falls into a different category of either speedster, trickster, brawler, or defender. These categories affect the character's stats, but it also impacts the items that they can pick up from the item boxes. Crew members can also be unlocked, which provide additional bonuses to an item's effectiveness. So there's a little more strategy involved here than your standard Mario Kart clone. Figuring out which crew members work well with a certain racer's item pool is pretty key. The atmosphere is also great, and again I'm reminded of Kingdom Hearts with the variety of tracks and how many different series are represented. I personally have always loved the old school Disney cartoons, so I was happy to see the black and white stage representing that era. Nearly every track has multiple routes that you can take, which is something I feel other games, even Mario Kart, don't really utilize as much as they could. Gameplay-wise, there's nothing horrible here. The game is incredibly focused on your boost ability, which is always shown using the bar at the top. Things like drifting, doing tricks, or riding on these weird anti-gravity rails let you build up your boost meter, and when it's full, you can activate it. As a free-to-play game, I'd say this is absolutely worth checking out, but be prepared for sensory overload and microtransactions everywhere you look when you're in the actual menus. But this wasn't Disney's first attempt at a kart racer. They've actually made a few in the past, not including shut down mobile games and every Cars game ever made. Even around Mario Kart 64's release, which is when the mascot racer era really boomed, Disney was licensing out their properties to have kart racers made. So let's start with a game that was also released on the Nintendo 64, developed by the standout developer Rare, and utilized an incredibly popular IP. Mickey Speedway USA. Yes, Diddy Kong Racing isn't the only racing game created by Rare for the N64. They were no stranger to licensed games like this. In fact, prior to Donkey Kong Country, they essentially created games like Sesame Street 1 through 3 and Spider-Man in order to bankroll their fully original titles. This isn't even the first Disney racing game they made. But it is the first one that doesn't look like sin. Because it's Rare, the game is unironically fun to play. It controls really well and has a decent speed, which is usually the biggest weakness that a Mario Kart clone can suffer from. We can probably thank Diddy Kong for this. Mickey Speedway was released 3 years after Diddy Kong Racing, so the engine, controls, and just past experience making a racing game probably really helped out. Thank you, Diddy Kong. The theme for the game is also pretty interesting. In the opening, we learn that Pluto has been fucking kidnapped by weasels. Professor Ludwig von Drake gives us cars so that we can search all across America faster. But for some reason, we get easily distracted by races instead of searching for Pluto. All throughout this, the weasels send you pictures of them basically torturing Pluto and bragging about it. But sorry, we gotta finish lap 3 of Los Angeles first. All of the tracks are based on different cities throughout the United States, but they are more or less just the types of tracks that you'd expect in a kart racer. Desert, city, snow. They've just been recontextualized into different cities in America. So I'm really looking forward to the Philadelphia stage in Smash. As far as the gameplay goes, there's nothing too terrible here. Like I said, the game's controls are really tight, so it's genuinely enjoyable. You have item blocks with items you'd expect, projectiles, boost, invincibility, hazards, and even coins that will increase your top speed during the match. The red shell equivalent kinda sucks though, because it doesn't follow the actual track. It tries to get to the targeted player in the shortest path possible, which means it runs into walls and breaks a majority of the time. So it's genuinely only helpful in huge open areas or when your opponent is straight in front of you. There's also a baseball item, which is neat, sort of a combination between the green shell and banana. You throw it out like normal and it can bounce around, but eventually its speed slows down and it stops rolling, staying on the track as a hazard. The AI is also infuriating. Not even playing on the hardest difficulty, it is genuinely so impossible to get in the lead and keep the lead. It's like their cars legitimately just go faster than yours, and there is nothing you can do about it. But that is kinda just typical of kart racers from this era, so it's not like I can personally blame Mickey Mouse for that. Rare also developed a Game Boy Color version of the game, so let's check that out too. Yeah, so while this shares the name with the N64 version of the game, it's very clear that this is just a retooling of Mickey's Racing Adventure, the first Disney racing game that Rare made. This was just back in the day when you had to make a handheld version that shared the same name as the home console version, even when literally everything else is different. There was some neat functionality between the two versions though. If you connected your Game Boy game to the N64 version using the transfer pack, you could unlock Huey as a playable racer. Dewey and Louie, as well as the Professor, are also secret racers, but they can be unlocked with just the N64 version. It's kinda cool seeing games have this kind of feature, since it feels like the transfer pack barely had any support. Is that a hidden Mickey? Earlier that same year, another Disney kart racing game was released, but this one was over on the PlayStation. Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour is quite a mouthful, and is also a game all about driving around different attractions found in Disney World in Orlando. As someone from Florida who's been to Disney World many times, this was honestly such a joy to experience. Racing through different tracks based on attractions I know very well was just so neat. And honestly, the whole idea of basing it around the theme park is really creative. You can play as Chip, Dale, Jiminy Cricket, or 10 different OCs designed specifically for this game. The actual racing is whatever. Like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. Really, the atmosphere of the game is what sells this one. Honestly, it's like a little time capsule. The parks have changed a lot over a couple of decades, and this game was before Disney had Star Wars or Marvel or half the successful properties they own. I mean, this game is using Dinosaur. That immediately tells you what era this was. Is that a hidden Mickey? Another Disney racer they created around this time was Toy Story Racer, released in 2001. This immediately jumps out to me as a repurposing of assets used in the Toy Story 2 game, which is a banger by the way. But honestly, it's fairly inoffensive for a kart racer. Each character has a set of challenges, and more challenges and characters unlock by completing those races and collecting army men. The controls are fairly ass, and it's a little unpolished, but you know, I'm a Toy Story fanboy, it was my favorite movie growing up, so again, this one was still kind of fun to me. Playing with these characters I love in locations from both the movie and game, it was just neat. And that really gets to the heart of these kart racers. They're sold on the use of the series or universe rather than their success as a racing game. And no one is immune to this, not even you. Is that a hidden Mickey? Another company that is no stranger to licensing out their characters is Nickelodeon. Platform fighters, 3D platformers, even crossovers and collaborations in other games. But in the last 5 years, the world was introduced to Nickelodeon Kart Racers, a game so nice they made it twice. And then one more time. This series isn't their first time making Mario Kart clones. They've made a few in the past, but these three together are something special. They really tell a story. 2018 saw the release of Nickelodeon Kart Racers 1, but it barely qualifies as a crossover. Only 4 different Nickelodeon series are present here, with only 12 racers, and 25% of those are Ninja Turtles, who are cool, but also effectively look like the same character. Also, the game looks horrifying. What did they do to Spring Dangle-A-Dog?
Oh my goodness!
But actually racing in the game is okay. It's not amazing, but we've covered far worse just in this video. Slime also plays an interesting role in this game, where you'll have sections of slime on the track. When you ride through these slime sections, your slime meter grows, cut into 3 parts, and you can use this slime to activate a small boost. It works alright, but again, it's not really something that's exciting. The coolest part is that there are whole slime river sections, and your character's vehicle will turn into a boat, which is a rare time when the transformation into a boat actually makes sense and it doesn't feel like they did it just because they can. I don't think I can overstate how painfully average this game felt. I wasn't having a blast, I don't think I'd even say I was having fun, but I did get permanent retina damage from the neon green of this load screen. And I guess that's exactly what the doctor ordered, because this game sold well enough for them to order a sequel, Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix. This game had a huge overhaul where they basically completely reworked the entire game. They more than doubled the character roster up to 30 playable characters from 12 different Nickelodeon shows and JoJo's Siwa for some reason. First, the physics have been reworked, which makes driving feel a lot nicer. The slime meter still exists in this game, but instead of being tied to a simple boost mechanic, the game now implements a pit crew sort of system, with a primary chief and 2 minor crew members. The primary chief offers an ability that can be activated when your slime meter is at maximum, while the minor crew members have a periodic, less impactful effect that occurs on a cooldown. I actually really like the way this works. It offers a great level of strategy, and it does it in a more in-depth way than Disney Speedstorm. Rather than just improving the effectiveness of certain items, you actually gain different effects, like gaining an instant boost if you get hit by an item, or earning a bonus item from an item box. It lets you prioritize your style of play, but it isn't overpowered either because each effect can only be activated once the cooldown is finished. But man, this game still has its problems, and the worst part is I want to like it. The track and character variety, the music, the crew mechanic. This is genuinely a game I could find myself enjoying and playing regularly, but it just runs so badly. Some tracks you'll have a buttery smooth experience, but then others you'll hit sections that dip you down into your grandfather's childhood slide projector. But somehow, despite all of this, a third entry was made as well. And this one solves the biggest problem that everybody had. It finally adds voice acting. Yeah, the first two games had absolutely zero voice acting, making the games feel completely silent and empty. I guess this is just standard practice for Nickelodeon games, because another particular game, also featuring Nickelodeon characters, had this exact same problem. This game sports 40 different characters from 19 Nicktoons and 90 crew characters, tons of new and returning tracks, and it's their third game in the series. So with all of these improvements, it's gotta be good, right? I don't know how, after 3 games, this is the worst that the series has run. This version of the game doesn't even feel like it was made for Switch like the others. It genuinely feels like a quick and dirty port of the PlayStation or Xbox versions. Maybe it runs well on those, but when your whole shtick is Mario Kart but different, you'd think you'd want to put up some kind of fighting chance on the console that literally has Mario Kart on it. Nope, that's it. After 3 tries, I'm done. Nickelodeon, I gave you a solid chance, but you've brought me to my wit's end, and now I'm gonna do the unthinkable. But now, let's take a look at those older games I mentioned, starting with Nicktoons Racing. The vibes for this one are awesome for anyone who grew up on these classic Nicktoons. It's also a little crazy to not see SpongeBob front and center for this game. Season 1 of SpongeBob aired between 1999 to 2001, so it was still fairly new and was absolutely not the juggernaut that it would become. He almost seems like an afterthought on the box art. God, I did not like this one's gameplay though. For starters, when you get hit by an item, it takes an actual 8-hour workday to finally regain control of your vehicle. And when you're getting hit 10 times in a race, that is so much time. And if you clip the wall, it's almost like you get vacuum sucked into it. There's no bouncing off of it or anything. You genuinely have to stop, reverse, and reorient yourself. It's a huge pace breaker. But a couple years later, they made a Game Boy Advance version as well. And while this version of the portable game is definitely improved thanks to the better hardware, I'm not fully convinced they didn't just make this game in order to put SpongeBob more front and center now that he was actually their de facto mascot. They also made a kart racer that was available on the Nick.com website, Nick Racers Revolution 3D. This is a pretty dinky little game. 4 tracks, 5 sets of duo characters, and a small variety of items. This is fairly impressive for a browser game, I'll give them that. And you can play as—
Oh my goodness!
So we've had Disney, we've had Nickelodeon. The last of the 3 big kids' TV networks can't miss out on the fun. Cartoon Network Racing features quite a few cartoons from the network, like Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab. The gameplay features duo racers, sort of like in Mario Kart Double Dash, though you can't switch them around on the fly. Your selected driver purely impacts your actual driving stats, and you want to pick your co-driver based on their tune power, which is activated after you max out a bar via drifting. There are some pretty nice tracks in the game, and having grown up with Cartoon Network also, I really like the atmosphere. But driving is only so-so, and while there are far more characters than I actually expected, I think the number of actual properties is a bit disappointing. If this game had been just a few years later, they would have had far more to choose from. Teen Titans, Kids Next Door, Ben 10. It's just sort of unfortunate timing because who is that? Another racing game around Mario Kart 64's heyday is found on the PlayStation, Chocobo Racing. Final Fantasy really found its footing during the 90s. It always did well in Japan, and it had varied success in the West, but it wasn't until Final Fantasy VII that things exploded and the Final Fantasy name actually carried some weight. And that, of course, leads to spin-offs. Chocobo Racing released for the PlayStation in 1999, with the name coming from the Chocobo Racing minigame found in the Final Fantasy series. Overall, Chocobo Racing pulls characters from the generic enemies and species found in the wider Final Fantasy universe. Chocobo, Moogles, mages, characters like that. But they also include some actual characters as well. Cloud's in the game, because of course he is, that's f***ing Cloud. Squall from Final Fantasy VIII is also a racer. Other Square series make appearances as well. Aya from Parasite Eve, and Jack from the 3D Battles of World Runner, so it's a fun little Square history lesson as well as a kart racer. The The game also executes a bit differently from Mario Kart. The core gameplay is obviously the same, but they deviate in ways to make it feel more unique and Final Fantasy. The first major change is that you can hold up to 3 items at a time, with them dragging behind you automatically. However, if you pick up multiples of the same item, they instead become stronger variants when finally used, emulating the magic upgrading system from Final Fantasy. Outside of items, you can also select a special ability for your racer. Each character has one that is their signature, but you can mix and match to your liking. These gradually charge throughout a race, and you can activate them once the meter fills. These abilities range from a simple boost or flying over hazards for a short period, to stealing items like the Boo item in Mario Kart, attacking all racers, or protecting yourself from attacks. I really like this. It adds an additional layer of strategy to your loadout, and you can kind of tweak to your own playstyle. Mario Kart got close to this with the character-specific special items and Double Dash, but it's never really been explored more since then, which I think is a shame. I usually opt for the abilities that protect you from incoming damage, because a big issue with this game is never knowing when something is coming your way. There's no incoming item indicator or sound effect that really gives you a heads up. Though to be fair, this wasn't exactly standard practice in the 90s, so I guess I can give it a pass. The track selection is a bit lacking as well, with only 10 total tracks in the game. I feel like the bare minimum should be 16, 4 tracks and 4 cups, but again, that may be the Mario Kart mindset speaking. 10 just feels like such a small number though. I guess to make up for that, there's actually a story mode in the game. It isn't long and you can clear it in a couple of hours, but it's genuinely entertaining. It's told in a storybook style, so I'm waiting on a lawsuit to be announced any day now. You travel from place to place, completing races and adding racers to your little party, ultimately racing against Bahamut and completing some silly Final Fantasy nonsense. There's plenty of fourth wall breaking and little jokes sprinkled throughout. It's genuinely a pretty funny story mode. Chocobo racing is often mentioned when the conversation of good Mario Kart clones comes up, and it comes from one of the few franchises with enough popularity to pull it off. So it's odd that for years, this sole PlayStation 1 game was Final Fantasy's only kart racer. At E3 2010, Square Enix announced a whole lineup of games, and one of these ended up as a teaser for a brand new racing game, Chocobo Racing 3D, which was then cancelled. All we've got are a few screenshots and some crunchy footage of that potential game. But then they gave it another try. 2022 saw the release of Chocobo GP, a Switch-exclusive title made to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the Final Fantasy series. Honestly, I think this is a great little way to celebrate the series, bringing back a beloved kart racer from the 90s that celebrates all things from the franchise. It's really good. The game perfectly recaptures the spirit of the original while bringing it into the modern era of kart racing. The Chocobo sub-series of games has also greatly evolved since the first game, so the racers in the game aren't just generic species this time, but actual characters from various Chocobo games, which is a great touch. And of course, you also have iconic Final Fantasy characters again, like Cloud Strife, Gilgamesh, and Ben? It includes a story mode that totally captures the spirit of the first one, and for some reason, it's fully voice acted. Like, of all things they put maximum effort into, this one was super surprising. But Square tried to have their cake and eat it too with this game, because they tried to make it a live service game. Season passes with new characters and tracks, in-game currency, microtransactions, these were all over the place. Nearly everything in the game needed to be bought using real-life money. There was no way to simply earn these through playing. Now, ordinarily, this isn't a bad thing by default, particularly if it's just cosmetics. Plenty of games use this model, but those games are all also pretty much free to play. Chocobo GP was a game you still had to pay a full price for just to get into the game and have to spend more money in the item shops. And they don't even have creator code Aaronitmar. This just did not sit right with the fans, and rightfully so. If you're selling a full-price game that has paid DLC, I feel that content should be purchasable at any point. Free-to-play games with timed events and season passes, I'm still not a crazy fan of that concept, but I can kinda offer a little more leeway for that. They offered a full version of the game that you would pay for, and that graciously allowed you to purchase the new content. But there was also a light version of the game, which offered only the bare minimum roster and only let you play the prologue of the story mode. But strangely, you could also play in the online mode. Man, this is a weird game. Like I said, players did not like this pay-to-pay model, and after 5 seasons, Square Enix turned heel and changed the whole system. The light version was done away with, leaving just the full-price version of the game. But now, everything can be unlocked simply by playing the game, earning tickets and coins, and then you can head over to the item shop to redeem stuff. This is truly how it should have been from the beginning in my opinion. But it does also suck that they immediately kinda screwed over anyone who was all in on the season pass stuff. Like, imagine having spent hundreds of dollars on this game to get everything in the game, and now anyone can purchase it and get all the stuff you did for like 40 bucks. Why did Square Enix just do that? But another big problem persists with this game: the track design. It sucks. Now, I don't mean the aesthetics or the design and theme of a track, I mean the literal thing you race on. The pool of tracks are split into 4 different categories: long, short, hyperspeed, and technical. So it seems like you get about 25% of each, right? So many of the tracks in this game fall into just the short or hyperspeed categories, and very few are the long or technical tracks. I find myself beginning a race, blinking, and then the entire thing is over. You just end up zooming through almost every race, you're barely playing the game. It would have been cool if they gave these tracks more laps to compensate, or, actually design more of the long and technical tracks. I'm not opposed to shorter tracks. I mean, Mario Kart's Baby Park is one of my favorites, but the reason that track works is because it's a super short one among a roster of medium to long tracks, so it makes that experience far more memorable. And this isn't even a problem that was solved by each season's new cups. They all continued to be short or hyperspeed, with the occasional long or technical track thrown in there. It's definitely a fun little game. It keeps all of the cool stuff that kept it unique, while also improving upon little things that 2 decades of kart racers sort of figured out along the way. It's only really fun in short bursts, honestly. To help advertise for Chocobo GP during its lead up and launch, a mobile game was also released, Chocobo GP Dash. And my god, this is awful. It's nothing more than a really thrown together Happy Wheels clone where you play as a Chocobo and Moogle trying not to tip over. As a standalone mobile game, this would just be bad. But as a mobile game being used to market another home console game, I mean, what were they thinking? Like, can you imagine somebody downloading this game and playing it and then thinking, dude, I gotta have this on my Switch? Speaking of bad games, Atari Karts. The Atari Jaguar was released in 1993, heralded as the first 64-bit console ever made, to which the general public responded with, "The hell's a bit?" This thing was a commercial failure, doing so poorly that it finally convinced Atari to exit the home console market forever. It only had 50 games in its library, but we were lucky enough that one of those was Atari Karts. Obviously inspired by Super Mario Kart, the developers actually managed to recreate the Mode 7 style of rendering that allowed for this fake 3D effect. Atari was impressed with their ability to copy-paste that style, and they wanted them to make a kart racer using popular Atari properties. What did they want, Breakout to drive a car? Yeah, I don't really know what they were expecting here, because it's not like Atari can really pack in some iconic characters for this game to really make it shine. Even at its worst, Mario Kart still has Mario. Who does Atari Karts have? Scully? I mean, the Wikipedia article literally only mentions one single character, Bentley Bear, and his most notable appearance is a cameo in the background of Wreck-It Ralph. Okay, so it may not have some notable characters, but maybe it has good gameplay. It doesn't have good gameplay. These controls are just awful. A normal turn is far too wide for any of the tracks they've designed, but you totally spin out after like 1 second of using the sharp turn button. Sometimes you'll activate Zen mode and you'll find this perfect middle ground where you have the most perfect lines, but then you'll lose it and the race is trash. Sometimes you clip on stuff that you don't even know is part of the terrain or isn't part of the track because everything is 2D and flat, you just can't tell. The items in this game are basically designed to fix this problem, giving you better speed or traction. But that just begs the question, why even do that? Just make your game fun to control the whole time. Don't make it a cute little power-up to tease me and then take it away. The only offensive items the game has either slow down your opponents or reverse their controls, which means nothing to cheater CPU characters. And every item panel is single use. Once you've run it over, it's X'd out and it can't be used at all for the rest of the race, which is just so lame. By the time you get to the last lap, you are just racing. There are no items to be used. Just a reminder that this game came out for the Atari Jaguar, which means that anyone who had the misfortune of owning this game when it was new had to play it on this monstrosity. but I was lucky enough to play this on the Atari 50 collection on Steam, so I could play using an Xbox controller. Yeah, that's right, I'm belittling Atari Jaguar owners, I'm a badass. Another big game company that took a stab at the kart racer was Sony, with ModNation Racers for the PlayStation 3 and PSP. While everything about it is pretty typical of a Mario Kart clone, the game's big selling point was the ability to create your own tracks. While incredibly easy to use, it also allows the tracks to be as complex as the player wants. The basics allow you to paint the track out as you like, essentially creating the path you would drive during a race. You can select where the item boxes go, place decorative elements, deform the track to make it uneven or add ramps. Really, you can do almost anything. Players could then share their custom tracks and download other users' creations to race on. The short and sweet pitch of the game was that it was LittleBigPlanet, but for the racing genre, which is an accurate description. So accurate that then they just made that game, LittleBigPlanet Karting, created by the exact same developers as ModNation Racers. This game boiled down to ModNation Racers with the LittleBigPlanet skin. The game has a narrator, you customize your own Sackboy, and collect little items and stickers. In the same way that Mario Kart captures the spirit of the Mario series, LittleBigPlanet Karting really captures the spirit of that series, just in the kart racing genre. The core elements of ModNation Racers and LittleBigPlanet Karting are incredibly similar, which makes sense given they are made by the same guys. LittleBigPlanet probably feels a tad more fine-tuned in both the racing and track creation aspects, simply because the developers had 2 extra years of experience. Of course, everything else is LittleBigPlanetified, so items, track themes, carts, and some mechanics are introduced that better fit that theme. And of course, you could also upload and download user tracks to play. Both games unfortunately had their servers shut down, which means you can't download custom tracks anymore. You can still make them all you want, they just can't ever leave your console. It's really a shame when this happens to games. And look, I get it, servers are expensive to keep up for a game that has a small user base. But that doesn't make it suck any less for a core function of the game to just be permanently disabled. The games do have fairly sizable story modes, which is more than you can generally expect from a kart racer. And there's also a dedicated community who are looking to create custom servers as an alternative, but as of this video, there haven't been any major releases or announcements. Konami didn't want to be left out of the fun either, so they made their own kart racer too. Konami Krazy Racers for Game Boy Advance, with a roster of plenty of Konami characters. You can race through a variety of tracks in this cool fake 3D engine, and... wait, is that? This is just Mario Kart! Krazy Racers takes advantage of the Mode 7 capabilities of the Game Boy Advance, just like many other games, and as a result, this just kinda looks and feels like Super Circuit. But the crazy part is that this game came out months before Super Circuit. Though I guess to be fair, both games are just using the same tech that was already used in Super Mario Kart, it was just capable of being done on a handheld now. The game tries to deviate a little bit, but the changes are so minor. The item boxes are categorized differently. You can grab blue item boxes to exclusively get a speed boost item, or a red item box that can give you any possible item. It mostly just looks and plays like Mario Kart, but I actually mean that in a good way. In the same way that you might have fun playing Mario Kart Super Circuit, you would have fun playing this game. At the very least, it's a fresh coat of paint and you play on different tracks using different characters and different items, but it's also not that different at the same time. It's also still held back a little bit by the hardware it was on, but if you were to pick this one up, I think you'd have a pretty good time with it. It even inspired a sequel for iOS and Android, Krazy Kart Racing, and that game is not available anymore. Please just let me play your games. Stop taking them off of digital app stores after like 8 minutes. I just want to play funny little games. A recent kart racing release comes from our favorite game mill, DreamWorks All-Star Kart Racing. If this is giving you war flashbacks, are you surprised? You can race as so many of your favorite DreamWorks characters, like Shrek, Poe, Megamind, and the escaped zoo animals. For some reason, this game is so slow. Even on the fastest speed setting, I feel like I'm rolling around in Elmer's glue. Combine that with the staple cheating CPUs, and you really just have a super mid kart racer. There are some aspects that really do interest me, I just can't be bothered when the game is so boring. One of my biggest complaints about kart racers is figuring out the boost mechanic at the beginning of a race. Every kart racer has them, but they are all different. Sometimes you press A on go, sometimes you begin accelerating on 2 or on 1 or at some other random point. And the game never tells you that this is a mechanic, so you're just left guessing when you pick up a new kart racer. But DreamWorks Kart doesn't do that. Instead, you get to play Friday Night Funkin', and if you time your inputs correctly, that gives you the boost start. I love this. Not only does it illustrate this to you in a fun way, it actually illustrates it to you at all. I feel like no kart racer actually tells you that you can get a rocket start at the beginning. You just kind of learned that in one of them and it applies to the rest of them. Trolls are also found throughout the levels. Sometimes they're the context for opening up an alternate path by driving through their magical harp thing. You can also collect music notes during a race. These are used to purchase different items in the shop, but these also fill up a meter in the corner during the race. When you max out this meter, the trolls will grant you an extra little item. And while this item aspect is cool, when you're on the receiving end, it can just be so frustrating, because once again, this game does not have any kind of an incoming item indicator that gives you a heads up. And this game released in 2023, like, I can excuse the 90s, but we've learned by now, show me what is about to hit me. And why does this game have gorgeous lighting for no reason? The character models are ass, the stages are acceptable, but the lighting? It's like Ultra 4K hyper ray traced lighting inside of... Overall, it's basically Nickelodeon kart racers with a different coat of paint. And that's not a compliment. But actually, I can play as Boss Baby, so never mind, I take it back. I take it all back, please forgive me. This is yet another company that attempted a modern kart racer, but also had given it a go in the past. DreamWorks' first ever kart racing game was done with their worldwide phenomenon, their biggest franchise ever. This game sucks. Horrible controls, a horrible camera. You can actually explode. And were they really so desperate for Antz to be this huge franchise that it needed to automatically have a companion kart racing game? I guess so. Antz Extreme Racing is at least on the PlayStation 2, so there is a bit more meat to it. But it still sucks so bad. Not only do they have karts, but there are all kinds of different races. You run, you fly on these beetles, you snowboard, and the controls for each and every one of them are bad. The kart sections control poorly, but they're at least tolerable. Every other section made me mad or motion sick or a confusing combination of the two. The Game Boy Advance version is exactly what you'd expect, but you still have health, so you die for some reason and lose the race automatically. Fortunately, in 2001, DreamWorks finally got their actual runaway success in Shrek. And naturally, it also had to have a kart racer. Shrek Swamp Kart Speedway dropped for the Game Boy Advance and is just like every other kart racer on GBA. Like at a certain point, you've played one of these on GBA, you've played them all. But this game does feature iconic kart racing items, like a thumbs up and turning into Little Red Riding Hood. The next Shrek racer was much better. Shrek Smash and Crash Racing for GameCube and PS2. This game's strange because it features a mixture of go-karts and weird creatures. Like Shrek rides this guy. Who is that? This game was pretty enjoyable, but I did have some rough moments with the controls. It's kind of like they tuned them for the characters who were riding animals, but that makes for a strange experience when you're controlling a vehicle. It was also way too easy to just bump a single thing and have your race come to a screeching halt. Also, does anyone else think it's weird Donkey makes his wife race for him? And naturally, there was also a Game Boy Advance version, and oh, why is it isometric? I don't like this. And why does he look even worse? Thankfully, the DS version is just the console version in bad quality, and I never thought that that would be a good thing. And after the success of the Madagascar movie, of course, they had to make a Madagascar Karts. This one's weird though. First, it's hot garbage. I mean, it's genuinely just one level above Wii Shovelware. It's just not very good. But also, it's barely a Madagascar Karts game. The game has 9 characters, and 2 of them are Shrek and Bob from Monsters vs. Aliens. Like, this literally just feels like a soft launch for a full DreamWorks kart racer. It's just weirdly disguised as a Madagascar game for no reason. Which is strange because there clearly wasn't enough content to make it a purely Madagascar-themed game. And that's why their next game was literally just a DreamWorks kart racer. But we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later because it's actually kind of interesting. I've played dozens of hours of these things at this point, and yet still there are kart racers that I haven't experienced. There are just so many of them. Iconic mascots of beloved franchises like Emoji Kart Racer takes everyone's favorite little text message faces and makes them tear up the streets in an action-packed racer. Because when I'm text messaging my many friends, I know I wish that my keyboard could drive a car. Forget everything I've ever said.
Please subscribe.
Okay, maybe not everything, but this is genuinely the worst kart racer I have ever played. Nearly every kart racer at least tries with their game. They may not always succeed, but you can tell that there was some creativity there, and the game's being a mess can be attributed to time crunch or lack of resources or just plain inexperience. But this is the first game that I think truly didn't give a single shit about what they made. They farted it out, threw it on storefronts, and called it a day. And I just don't know where to start. It takes like a full second between you hitting a direction on the joystick and when your kart actually begins turning, which is crazy. There doesn't seem to be any kind of drifting either. You just have exactly one turn that you get to use the entire time. And the physics of the game are so nonsensical. There are a ton of obstacles and hazards on the tracks, and if you hit one of them, chances are you come to a screeching halt and will get hit at least one or two more times by the exact same thing, because you just aren't able to get out of the way in time. Nothing makes it more obvious to me that the devs knew this game kinda controlled like ass than the fact that they implemented a reset button. Press it at any time and you warp to a nearby safe part of the track. That alone signals that this was a quick and dirty job with very little care. I mean, I truly just had so many insane moments playing this game. It felt like every race had something unbelievably dumb happen, like you couldn't make this up. And when you win a race, you love to hear that victory fanfare. But from one yellow circle to another, we moved to Pac-Man. Pac-Man was experiencing a sort of renaissance back in the 2000s, particularly with the Pac-Man World series, so a kart racer was the natural next step, with Pac-Man World Rally. And this one is honestly pretty good. It has some really fun ideas. When performing a drift, a meter at the bottom of the screen charges up. When you max it out, you gain a Guardian, and these can be activated to protect you from attacks for a short while. Drifting itself is pretty slippery, and while that sucks from a control perspective, I think it balances fairly well with the Guardian system, so that you aren't always perfectly bobbing and weaving and protecting yourself from items at all times. You can also drive over fruit on the tracks, and this fruit can be spent at matching checkpoints to open up shortcuts. And I mean shortcuts. These things skip so much of the track sometimes. You're at a severe disadvantage if you miss them. It's refreshing to see a shortcut actually be a shortcut. But perhaps the biggest unique mechanic the game has is the Pac-Mobile. While racing, you can collect Pac dots along the track. This charges up a second meter on screen, and when this one is full, you can activate it to become the Pac-Mobile and gain an increase in speed. Every other racer will also transform, turning into little blue ghosts on unicycles, and if you make contact, you can eat them. This is a really clever way of taking Pac-Man's main shtick from the arcade game and putting it into the kart racing genre. I really like it. Pac-Man World Rally is sort of a product of its time, but man, it was such a joy to play a kart racer that wanted to be unique and also celebrate their little slice of the gaming world, even down to the character options. You've got your Pac-Man good guys and bad guys, of course, and then you've got fun little nods to other Namco titles as well. This game actually saw a PSP entry, and to some, it's the definitive version of the game, at least in terms of content. It comes with exclusive characters, an additional track, 2 battle arenas, and an exclusive challenge mode. The only problem is you have to play it on the PSP. Honestly, this is a game I'd love to see get the repack treatment, like with the Pac-Man World games. Update the visuals, tweak the controls, maybe some bonus content, and I could see people really enjoying this game in the modern day. Namco also released a second Pac-Man racer in 2010, Pac-Man Kart Rally, though this one was, say it with me, a mobile game. 2 versions of this game were created. The first version was a mobile game. The first version was a 2D Java game, designed for some of the less powerful phones on the market. The second was for smartphones, a full 3D version of the game. This wasn't that uncommon at the time. The general public was just starting to transition to smartphones, so they still wanted something for those with the screen that slid up. The 2D version is as good as any cell phone kart racer with 240 pixels of screen real estate can be, but there are some quality details here. The sprite work is top notch, and in tandem with smooth animations and controls, the presentation for this one is really nice, even if the gameplay is only so-so. The 3D version is frankly worse in the visuals department, and the gameplay is equally as average. The controls are unbelievably slippery. You sometimes turn so aggressively the camera can't even keep track of you. Considering this was the early days of more advanced gaming on smartphones, honestly, it's a good enough attempt, but it's absolutely not something you want to try to play today. So when I tried to play it today, I saw that it was also available on Amazon Fire TV, despite being delisted from the mobile storefronts. So I picked up a Fire Stick just to learn that it's also delisted on there, and the internet lied to me. So to play it, I had to use... And if the iPhone/Android/Amazon Fire Stick wasn't enough, they also made a 3D version for Java phones too. That's right, a secret third version. Honestly, this is more impressive than the more advanced version for the smartphones. Like, I'm genuinely so impressed that this was running on anything that had the Nokia name on it, much less running smoothly. It's about the same as the 2D version as far as gameplay goes, but it is technically very impressive. I feel I should mention the Mario Kart arcade games here. Mario Kart Arcade GP, GP2, GP Deluxe, and GP VR. But I'm not going to dive into the details of those for two reasons. For one, they're not really Pac-Man racers. While it does feature Namco elements and characters in nearly all of them, because Bandai Namco developed them, it's very firmly a Mario Kart game. But for another reason, I already talked about all of them in their own dedicated video. And you know what? Let's just keep rolling with the yellow guys. LEGO has a surprising number of racing games under their belt, starting all the way back in the 90s. During that time, they were looking at how to expand their brand outside of just the bricks, and one of the obvious avenues was video games. One of their first big ventures was LEGO Island, an adventure game that takes place on a big island. The size of the game made vehicles a no-brainer, which then invited vehicle races to the game. While the racing portions weren't exactly stellar, the groundwork and ideas were already there for a LEGO racing game, which was inevitably made in LEGO Racers. While a pretty obvious Mario Kart clone, the identity of this game lives in the vehicle builder, where you can use the LEGO pieces to craft your very own vehicle. Like many of the LEGO games of the time, this one is pretty rough. The controls aren't very good, and the courses are difficult to navigate on top of that. At one point during a race, I spun out and it didn't reorient me forward. It just decided, you're facing this way now. And that basically dooms you in a race, because these AI are cheaters. Getting second place, third place, no problem. But to win first place, I have to literally change my DNA to become a LEGO piece in order to be that good. It's just not fair. Each color item brick corresponds to a different type of item, like speed, offensive, or defensive. If you continue to run through the same color, you'll upgrade to a better item, and then another better item. But this is really hard to do, so you'll typically end up using the level 1 or 2 items most of the time. The downside is that the low-level offensive items kinda suck, so it's really difficult to get to higher places using them. Also, why does this pirate know my name? LEGO's next attempt was a PC game in 2000, LEGO Stunt Rally. Being a game designed for Windows 98, I wasn't able to get this one running on my current system, but I do think I was able to get a couple of viruses. In both the PC and Game Boy Color games, you don't actually control the car. Steering is automatic, and you can control cornering and your speed, but really that's about it. I figured I'd mention it because it's a racing game, but it's absolutely nothing like Mario Kart. In 2001, they gave it another go with LEGO Racers 2 on the PlayStation 2, and with more advanced hardware, they could do much more. For starters, this one has a whole adventure mode, complete with a character creator, explorable world, and group bullying in the very first cutscene. This game ends up being sort of the inverse of LEGO Island. While that was an open world game with racing elements, LEGO Racers 2 is a racing game with open world elements. Each world has a series of races you can complete in order to move on to the next world, and ultimately you want to save the universe from race cars or something. I made my character a car where he technically can't see, but that made it fairly difficult for me in real life to see too, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. Once again, this one is a little bit tough in the controls department. Your vehicle is already very slippery, and certain terrain makes it much worse, and not always in a manageable way. Again, at certain points the game just decided I was driving in a completely different direction. Well, maybe third time's the charm. Drome Racers released in 2003, again for the PS2, but this time for GameCube as well. So now even more people can experience a pretty mediocre racing game. Drome Racers departs even more from the silly kart racing genre, and it feels like they just wanted to make a straight-up racing simulator game, but with items. And in doing so, you just end up with this lukewarm kind of game. It loses all the fun and whimsy of a kart racer, but it's also not worth your time as a racing sim. It tried to be both, but succeeded at neither. This game is wild to start out with. I figured out the controls eventually, but starting my first couple races, I was struggling. I felt like I was just flailing all over the place with no explanation. But playing this game, I just had one question. What the hell does this have to do with LEGO? Each of these games also had corresponding handheld ports. LEGO Racers for Game Boy Color is about the best you can do on an 8-bit handheld. The illusion of 3D, a basic left and right simulator, you kinda know what you're getting into. But damn do these races take forever. My family just put me in a home, that's how long this race took. LEGO Racers 2 for Game Boy Advance is fine. I mean, it's definitely a step up from the Game Boy Color game, and it features an adventure mode, but that's really all it has going for it. Drone Racers on GBA is also just fine. While it's not much of a looker, it's very impressive that this game is actually running in 3D. They're single color 3D shapes, but it's impressive what they got to run on the Game Boy Advance. But outside of these handheld ports, LEGO also released a Java mobile game, because of course they did. And this one actually kinda surprised me. Where other Java racing games are just left-right simulators, this one is done from an overhead perspective, kinda like Stunt Rally. But the controls are actually really fluid, especially for an old phone game. You can upgrade your car, there's a decent enough track variety. They did alright with this one. I don't think I'd hate having it on my phone. And then there's... none of these words are in the dictionary. This was a mobile and web game that isn't really a kart racer. You do Star Wars pod racing on variations of the exact same track, hitting targets along the way that give you more boost charges. It's really nothing too complicated, but I have to admit, if I was a 10-year-old when this was a thing, I would have played it for hours. But finally, in 2023, we got a modern kart racer from LEGO, LEGO 2K Drive. That's a lot of drives. In the 20 years since their last racing game, LEGO really found its modern identity. Not just with the licensed games like LEGO Star Wars, but with their original projects like the LEGO Movie. You kinda know the tone, humor, and amount of gameplay that you're gonna get with a LEGO game at this point. So of all the LEGO racing games, this one actually feels the most LEGO. They also just figured out how to make good video games too. 2K Drive is once again an open world racing game, taking place in Bricklandia. You travel around the open world completing quests. During actual races, your vehicle can transform based on 3 categories: street, off-road, and water, and it transforms mid-race depending on the terrain you're currently on. But I feel like the whole on-the-fly building thing has really been cemented in LEGO games. It's not like the vehicle transformation necessarily needs an explanation, but it's definitely a plus that the swapping vehicles thing just kind of fits well with LEGO. The driving system is pretty weird though. Your boost meter can be filled up by 2 things. The first is just basic drifting, which makes sense. But the second is by destroying objects in your path. So the game is actively incentivizing you to go off-road and destroy things. But there were 2 big problems I noticed with this. Sometimes the sections are very confusing. You aren't fully sure what's off-road versus the actual track. And sometimes the actual track is off-road and you aren't fully clear on it. It can genuinely be very disorienting. The other part is that because everyone is constantly smashing into things, there are LEGO bricks flying everywhere. It genuinely gets so chaotic. It's major sensory overload. I felt like I was dissociating and just following the pretty arrows and hoping for the best. Also, my PC fans kicked up to 100% immediately when I booted up. Overall, this game is absolutely LEGO's best racing game. But naturally, it's a game made in the modern era, so there are a ton of microtransactions. But if you love spending money on digital LEGO bricks, then this game is for you. Another series that surprisingly has a kart racer is none other than Dragon Ball. And of course, it was only in Japan. iMode was a Japanese mobile internet service that offered all kinds of features for your phone, including games. There are a ton of these things, including quite a few Dragon Ball games, and one of these was Dragon Ball Racing. It's a pretty standard mobile phone racing game with some rather impressive 3D tracks combined with sprite-based racers. Is that Vegeta on a motorcycle? But for a while there, this game was inaccessible unless you were in Japan in 2009 using one of these compatible phones. And even then, the iMode service is in the process of being shut down, which means we would lose this game forever. That is, until some wonderful game preservationists began work getting as many of these iMode games archived as they could. The Keitai Archive has built a launcher that allows you to search through their database of backed up games and play them for yourself. And luckily, Dragon Ball Racing is on here. Kinda. The full release isn't actually archived yet. We only have the trial version. This lets you race on 2 variations of a single track, and you can only play as Goku, racing against Vegeta, Piccolo, and Bulma. But it's still really cool to be able to play this game even in this nerfed form. It honestly makes me wonder, with all of the different games that have been made using Dragon Ball, It's kind of odd that this is the only kart racing game in its entire history. Maybe someday we'll be able to play as Krillin. Yet another surprising franchise with a kart racer is Mega Man, with the release of Mega Man Battle and Chase. This was originally only available in Japan and Europe, though North America later got it as part of the Mega Man X collection. And I gotta say, this is another kart racer that takes elements from the original series and applies them in very cool ways to the racing gameplay. Instead of item boxes, each character has an item unique to them, like Mega Man's Mega Buster. This weapon has a weaker attack that you can use frequently, or you can allow the gauge at the top to fill up and then use a stronger move. On top of that, enemies are all over each track. After running over or attacking 10 of these, you get an item that impacts other racers, like disabling their weapons or turning the enemies into mines. On top of that, in the game's Grand Prix mode, defeating characters in a race allows you to unlock their car parts and customize your vehicle. Both of these are such cool ways to take the mechanics of Mega Man, unique weapons for each boss, and gaining those weapons when you beat them, and mixing them into a kart racing game. As far as the actual gameplay goes, it's pretty average. Honestly, the biggest downsides are the frame rate and that a third of your screen is taken up by a rear view camera and the map. It's also got that crunchy PlayStation 1 look to it, but I have kind of a soft spot for that, so I don't really consider that a downside. And hey, you can visit iconic Mega Man locales such as Street. Apparently, a North American version was made, but got axed by Sony because of an oversaturation of mascot kart racers already on the market, which, yeah, that makes sense. And of course, there's also a Rayman Kart, because why not? This is yet another Java phone game. Frankly, it doesn't do anything spectacular. It's basically like any other Java kart racer. It's got a variety of Rayman characters from the Rabbids era, but honestly, what does this one have that others don't? Nothing really makes it stand out aside from having a Rayman skin. Mega Fist! Okay, never mind. What do you think is faster? A blue hedgehog who can canonically run around at the speed of sound, or an average mid-size sedan? We're playing Sonic racing games. Sega's first jump into the kart racing genre was with Sonic Drift, released for the Sega Game Gear in 1994, exclusively in Japan. But in the years since, it's been re-released in various collections, like Sonic Origins Plus. You can definitely see where they were inspired by Super Mario Kart, and it's an interesting choice to put it on a handheld with 18 pixels of screen size, but hey, I respect it. Actually, I lied, I don't respect it at all. The screen on the Game Gear is already so tiny. There's just barely any room for an engaging amount of content. And on top of that, they split the 18 pixel screen in half to display a map, which is just insane. You barely have any screen for actual racing. There are only 4 racers: Sonic, Tails, Eggman, and Amy. And there are 18 tracks, which is a deceptively high number. Really, there are 6 track themes, and 3 different layouts for each, and when the layouts are just this, it's really not all that impressive. There are also a limited number of items, but for being on the Game Gear, that doesn't bother me all that much. There are springs that let you jump in the air, red monitors for boost, and blue monitors for invincibility. Along with that, you can pick up rings, and collecting 2 lets you spend them on a character's special ability. I just did not really care for this game. The way that they tried to simulate moving down the track by alternating the colors of these lines just hurts my eyes so bad. They really flopped on the handling as well, as many of these old kart racers did. Turns are so tight that you have to drift on them, but you can spin out after like half a second of drifting. So your options are spin out on the track, or drive in the grass and hit a road sign. Try again? I think I'm okay. They made a sequel. Sonic Drift 2 was once again released for the Game Gear, but this time left Japan and saw a worldwide release. Generally, the game plays the same as Drift 1, but they did make some small adjustments. The movement was kind of improved. I do feel like I have better control of my character a little bit, but overall it still kinda sucks. They also changed the colors on the tracks to simulate the moving road, which makes it so much easier on the eyes. Except for on this track, which is as bad as ever. I obviously wasn't playing this on a real Game Gear, so it's possible that the alternating colors weren't that big a deal on the original screen, but on the emulated versions they made for modern collections, it was such an eyesore. The tracks also have a little more charm to them. There are elements in the environment that just add that little bit extra. The tracks are also a bit more elaborate this time around. I guess they got a little overconfident because they touched up the controls, but sadly, it wasn't enough because you can still lose your handling so easily. Also, f*** the rainy Savannah track. I have no idea why they included this lightning that flashbangs you every few seconds, which is horrible for a game where you can only see 18 pixels in the first place. This time around, they added these weird slope things at certain stretches, and I have no idea what they're supposed to be. When I first saw this show up, I actually thought my game was glitching. It just kinda looks wrong. Basically, Sonic Drift 2 is the same as Sonic Drift 1. In modern terms, it feels more like a patch update than it does a sequel. But I do get to play as my favorite character, Knuckles. After 2 so-so games on an incredibly clunky handheld, Sega asked themselves what everyone else was asking. Why is Sonic in a car? Sonic R was Sega's first ever home console Sonic racing game, released for the Sega Saturn. Traveler's Tales was commissioned to develop the game, retooling an engine for a Formula 1 game that they had previously been working on. Rather than making strictly a racing game, Traveler's Tales wanted to integrate Sonic's core series of platformers into the racing genre, which resulted in the unique setup seen here. Most characters just straight up run, but then you got damn cheaters like Robotnik and Amy who get to use vehicles for some reason. Every course has alternate paths and secret areas to find, and this is all done by essentially giving the racer freedom to go anywhere. Other kart racers keep you strictly on the path that the developers have given you, and you get plopped on the track if you try to leave. With Sonic R, you can go anywhere, even ignoring the track altogether. And it was certainly an interesting premise. Now, prior to this video, I had never played Sonic R before, but the game is the butt of so many jokes and routinely shows up on worst game compilations, so all of this was already in the back of my mind before I booted the game up. And let me just say, the internet wasn't wrong this time. These are some of the slipperiest controls I have ever encountered. It's like every stage has ice physics, but nope, that's just how the game plays. A lot of times in these games there are very hard turns where you need to hit a really good line to not bonk the sides. But there are truly some turns in this game that I could never successfully make it through. It's like Sonic has butter on his feet. An aspect of the game I actually don't mind is the track design with the alternate paths, at least in concept. It's sort of like that Yoshi's Valley track in Mario Kart 64, with a ton of different paths that you can take. In execution though, I think there's definite room for improvement. Like, it's cool you can take alternate routes, but there just ends up being an objectively fastest route that once you figure it out, you just end up taking it every time. But one downside of making the whole map traversable is that all the cool fancy stuff is kinda pointless. Like, check out this loop-de-loop. Whee! Yeah, taking it is completely pointless. In fact, the CPU racers literally just run around it too. It's actually hilarious. They know that's a waste of time. And one of the worst crimes is that there are only 5 tracks. That is shockingly low. But I guess there is a plus side. It means less of this atrocious game to play. I mean, it's a neat idea for a racing game, since being fast is Sonic's whole thing. It just didn't execute all that well. Apparently, Traveler's Tales only had 9 months of development for this, so frankly, I have to give props to them for actually managing to create a functional game in that amount of time. Okay, maybe they just get one prop. But Sega doesn't exclusively create mediocrity for their consoles. No. They're down for anything that can play games. Over in Japan, Sega had a pretty consistent flow of games released for cell phones under the service called Sonic Cafe. There were ports of some of their pre-existing games, and there were also basic phone games with a Sonic theme, like billiards or card games. But they also created some more original stuff, like Sonic Racing Kart, originally released in 2002. Calling this a racing game is pretty generous. It's a glorified time trial mode where you can race through a handful of courses and try to loop the track as fast as you can. If you were playing the service while it was still live, you could download other players' races and try to beat their time. So I guess in that sense, it is a racing game. Sonic Cafe and its successor, Puyo Puyo Sega, have both since been discontinued, and you can't play this game in any official capacity. In fact, I couldn't even track down the Japanese version of the game. The one I'm playing was actually a graphically updated and localized version released in Brazil. And speaking of games you can't find, Racing Kart got a sequel, Sonic Kart 3DX. Now this is true and honest lost media. This game was also released on both of Sega's mobile services, but an archive version of this game has never been posted online. For a while, footage wasn't even available, until December 2020, when a pretty lengthy YouTube video was posted showing off gameplay for the game. As the name suggests, it was a 3D sequel to Racing Kart and had a similar time trial mode. However, you could also race others using the network, though naturally the uploader wasn't able to recreate this. Honestly, it looks fine, but I think the novelty of it being lost media makes it seem way more interesting than it actually is, and if this game was readily available, I don't think very many people would choose to play it. So we've had Sonic in a cart, we had Sonic running on his feet, and we had Sonic stuck inside a cell phone nearly lost from recorded history. What else could Sega try? Sonic Riders was Sega's answer to fans wanting another Sonic racing game. And you know what? Fair enough. It had been almost a decade since Sonic R. I think it's been enough time to give it another try. They set out with the goal of making a racing game better than any previous Sonic game. But they didn't want to create your standard racing game. They wanted to have tricks and more dynamic movement, which they felt couldn't be done in a car. So they landed on a hoverboard, combining the versatility of a snowboard or surfboard while being able to work on any terrain, which is a great idea. I've always had a soft spot for boarding games, like Tony Hawk or SSX, but putting it in a Sonic context makes it more over the top. Sonic Riders introduced 3 new characters as well: Jet the Hawk, Wave the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross, collectively known as the Babylon Rogues. In the story mode, Eggman holds a racing tournament, and then a few story beats go by, and it turns out you're reviving an ancient civilization. It's so funny what Sega does with Sonic sometimes. Like, yeah, here's the silly little hedgehog guy in a racing game. By the way, Satan's here, and if you don't skateboard, he'll send you to the 9th circle of hell. Unfortunately though, I really tried to like this one, but the controls and whole air system just never clicked for me. You've got an air meter on the side, and you have to keep this meter filled to maintain your speed by either picking up air from item boxes or performing tricks. If you hit empty, you just have to run until you can refill at a pit stop. Now I get they wanted a layer of strategy, but I kinda just hate it. Like, you lose air by drifting, which is one of the most basic mechanics of a racing game, but it's like they're actively discouraging you from drifting. It also felt like a struggle to get things like the charge jump or grinding to work, but I don't know, maybe that is just a skill issue. Okay, on further reflection, I feel I was probably a little too harsh here. I think my criticisms are certainly valid as first impressions. The gameplay mechanics do take quite a bit of getting used to, but once you manage to become more skilled at them, the gameplay really does open up in a fun way. So please don't yell at me, or do, I guess, I'm not your mom. Every track has alternate paths that are exclusive to certain character archetypes: speed, flight, and power, inspired by the same system found in Sonic Heroes. Speed lets you grind on rails, flight lets you take accelerators through the air bypassing part of the track, and power lets you smash through obstacles that other characters can't clear. Early on, these are essentially locked to particular characters, but eventually you can unlock gear that counts as multiple types, letting you choose which path you'd like to take depending on the race, and I actually kinda like this. It builds upon the alternate route ideas from Sonic R, while avoiding the problem of making one route the default fastest. Most of these end up taking about the same amount of time, you just do so in a different way. Despite not loving the gameplay, I found some of the guest franchise elements really fun. There are some general Sega reps as racers, II from Monkey Ball, Knights, and Ooh La La from Space Channel 5. There are also 2 sick Sega-themed tracks, where you race on segments themed after different games, like on a tilting Monkey Ball map or literally jumping into the Krazy taxi. The crossover aspect is so fun, and it's something they're going to lean into a lot in just a few years. Apparently a Game Boy Advance version was also in the works, but that ended up being scrapped, possibly because a more powerful hardware was on the horizon. Speaking of which, later the same year Sonic Riders was released, another Sonic racing game came out, Sonic Rivals for the PSP. Both Riders and Rivals were released to commemorate Sonic's 15th anniversary, and while Riders was a racing game from the jump, Sonic Rivals actually started out as a platformer before shifting focus over to a racing game. However, they kept the platformer style of gameplay they had originally built rather than starting from scratch. As a result, you end up playing this weird fusion where it feels like the classic Genesis Sonic games in gameplay, but you're racing against other characters at the same time as well. I actually think this is a really neat idea. It's a little funky, but building upon the classic gameplay is really creative. It's also pretty cool to see some characters in this 2D platformer context where we rarely, if ever, have seen them. And in concept, this should work really well, but getting the actual game in my hands, it's just alright. The controls are fairly clunky, and I just don't feel like I'm going very fast. That's a flop on 2 accounts, not going fast in a racing game and not going fast in a Sonic game. Maybe it's because it was made for a PSP with a small screen, but it just doesn't ever feel that exciting. And then there's another downside to the screen size. There are obstacles, hazards, and if you're going at your very slow top speed, you just don't really have that much time to react. Then there are the boost objects, where you pause for a second and can press either X to jump up or circle to boost forward, but again, you don't have very much time to notice these objects, decide on an input, and then press it, so you end up just doing neither of those and you take a loss on your speed as a result. It's like those sections in the classic Sonic games where you're speeding down the track, but then a spring sends you backwards or you run into a set of spikes. But now, put that in a racing game, you can never see it coming, and the AI is also perfect and knows where to go and what to avoid. It's probably a decent balance mechanic when you race against another human, but who's busting out their PSPs in 2024 to run some Sonic Rival sets? The items in this game are weird. I could be wrong, but it felt like any item I used could basically hit the opponent no matter how far ahead they are, which makes it feel like there is no advantage to being in the lead until the last stretch of the track. If I can just get hit with a fireball or ice blast from literally anywhere, why bother if I can just stay behind and do that to them? Each character can also pick up an item to activate their signature move. Sonic gets a huge burst of speed, Shadow gets chaos control, the usual kind of things. But Silver's is bullshit. He activates ESP, which randomizes your controls no matter how far away you are from him. So basically, if he's a mile ahead of you, your controls still get mixed up, and Silver can just increase his lead even more. It's insane. The game also has this weird card collection aspect, where you earn them as rewards through gameplay, and then use them to customize your racer. Naturally, a big emphasis is on cosmetics, but you can also change up your character's stats for multiplayer as well. The cards vaguely play a role in the story mode as well. It turns out Eggman has this magical camera that can turn anything into a card, like he's some Yu-Gi-Oh villain or something. Then it turns out it's actually a descendant of Eggman's disguised as Eggman who wants to take a picture of the entire Earth and turn it into a card or something. However, what's really weird about the story mode is the way these supposed friends interact with each other. It's supposed to be the rivals part of Sonic Rivals, but characters just show up and beef with each other on sight, and in some cases it kinda just feels out of character. You end up racing characters for most of the story, however you will also regularly have these weird boss fights where you have to defeat the boss before your rival, which boils down to performing a homing attack on the rival over and over until the boss's weak point reveals itself. Really fun stuff. To promote the game, the Sonic Rivals website also had a flash game, which is technically a racing game. In one-player mode, it's just a time trial, but there's also a two-player mode where each player controls part of the keyboard and races against each other. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's a flash game and it's from 2006. It's about as good or as bad as the vast majority of flash games from that time. And then, literally the year after Sonic Rivals, they made a sequel. Sonic Rivals 2 is almost exactly like Sonic Rivals 1, but with some minor changes to gameplay. I also had an even harder time with the boost objects. I don't know if they made the timing less generous, but it sure does seem like it because I was failing these things all the time. And there are even more characters. Surprisingly, there were only 5 characters in the first game. In Rivals 2, we get a whopping, 3 more. But they did also throw in a new mode, Battle. Rather than give you a track or a boss to fight around you, you literally just fight each other. They have other modes like Capture the Chow and King of the Hill, which is pretty neat. It at least somewhat justifies a whole new sequel, because frankly, this is just the same game. Scratch that. Sonic Rivals 2 has voice acting, and some of the best one-take voice acting that you've ever heard.
Hey, look! It's Knuckles and Rouge! Well, look who it is, Knuckles and Rouge.
This pair of games just feels so bland. I like the idea of turning the classic Sonic gameplay into a racing context. I just didn't really care for the games that they ultimately made. Shortly after Sonic Rivals 2, another console racing game dropped. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity released for both the Wii and PlayStation 2. The Wii version naturally had motion controls, and I tried those out for all of 10 seconds before I just gave up and settled on using the GameCube controller. The story for this game is wild. A magical bracelet falls into Midgar from Final Fantasy VII and grants Sonic anti-gravity powers, and then suddenly the robot cops are after him. The Babylon Rogues are back, and these magic bracelets are actually used to summon the Babylon Garden, a floating city. Then, Eggman summons a black hole inside of this city. And then, it turns out that the ancient Babylonians were actually aliens the entire time. The air system from the first Riders game has thankfully been totally replaced with a brand new gravity system. Throughout a race, you'll earn gravity points through things like item boxes, doing tricks, or grinding. Then you can spend this gravity in 2 different ways. The first is gravity control, which allows you to shift gravity and pivot into a totally different direction. This can be used to access alternate routes, which is a neat way to include alternate pathing while still using the new system. Its other purpose is a replacement for drifting, being able to pause and turn on a dime to make a sharp turn. This is way worse than just plain drifting. I mean, in this series, they are 0 for 2 on drifting mechanics. It's far too difficult to aim down the straightaway, and you feel the pressure when your meter is actually going down. Again, it feels like they're actively punishing you for drifting, and that's just a core mechanic of racing games at this point, so it's kind of counterintuitive. The other use for gravity is Gravity Dive, which is best used on long straightaways. This will blast you forward at high speeds as long as you have gravity in the meter, and you can run into and bounce off other objects to add to your meter, prolonging how long this boost can last. Another mechanic in the game is gear parts. During the race, you'll collect rings, and you can spend those rings to activate one of your board's gear parts. These give you a whole bunch of upgrades or passives, like a bigger gauge, improved endurance, or increased stats. It can also transform your gear. There's a grind upgrade, one that turns it into an air ride, allowing you to take air paths, and a bike that blasts through obstacles. There's even one that effectively lets you drift normally, which hurts especially. While these are kinda the same as the board-specific categories in the previous game, I kinda like that it's something you need to activate in a race. By the time you have enough rings to transform your board, you're probably at the end of the second lap or starting the third lap, so these alternate routes feel like they open up at the end of a race, making it more engaging to switch up your path. Rather than the course changing on the final lap, or those paths being there every time, you're simply capable of accessing these routes that were always there. Once again, there are more fun Sega racers and tracks, themed around both the 1980s and 1990s Sega games, which is really fun. Overall, I kinda like this game. It's definitely an improvement on the first Riders, which I didn't exactly care for, but this one feels like they tightened up the gameplay and got rid of the ability to not be able to race, which is nice. Also, for some reason, Jet loves to call Sonic by his full government name.
Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog.
But after a decade of fighting it, Sega finally relented, and we got... Now this is what I'm talking about. Sonic characters and Sega All-Stars in a huge crossover racing game that actually takes place in cars. No skateboards, no feet, we're finally just in plain old race cars the way God intended. And the best part is, it plays so good. Of all the different Mario Kart clones I've played over the years, this is actually one of the best feeling ones. It really is up there with Mario Kart in just hitting the mark in nearly every category. The roster is also incredibly strong. Obviously, Sonic characters take the forefront, which is fine, but they've included a ton of characters from other Sega series as well. And because the game dropped on multiple consoles, there are also some exclusive characters. On the Wii version, you can play as your Mii, which is neat. Mario was apparently planned to appear as a guest character as well, but with Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games being fairly new, I guess they didn't want to oversaturate that crossover. Over on the Xbox, you could play as your Xbox avatar, but a full exclusive character was also on Xbox, Banjo and Kazooie from Nuts and Bolts. Okay, so despite their design being super whack, this collab is actually pretty cool. The newest Banjo game was all about vehicle creation, so including them in a racing game was actually a really clever crossover. Their vehicle was even provided by Rare, which came from a scrapped Banjo-Kazooie racing game, which was a sort of precursor to Nuts and Bolts. This collab was so notable that the duo received top billing, being officially in the game's title and on the box for the Xbox version. There are also the classic kart racer items like you'd expect, substitutes for green shells, red shells, bananas, items like that. But each racer also has their own signature item, which allows them to activate their All-Star move. Each has a different theme based on the character and slightly different effects, but generally these items tend to launch you forward faster while also hitting enemies in the way. But they're so cool being themed around each individual character. It reminds me of those special character items from Double Dash, but cranked up to 11. All of the tracks in the game are really solid as well, representing a wide range of themes and also referencing Sega's rich library. The exception, I think, is the Jet Set Radio tracks, where they kinda just feel like city. It would have been nice to see a little more of the graffiti and popping color flair that Jet Set Radio has, but other than that, the tracks are super solid. The frame rate on the console version, though, is also pretty rough at certain points. Playing the PC version pretty much solves that problem, especially with modern hardware, but at the cost of having 0 exclusive characters. Ah, my favorite country, Sega. Shockingly, the home consoles weren't the only versions of the game. They miraculously put this game on the Nintendo DS. And what's more, it's actually kinda good. This didn't feel like a quick and dirty port. Everything is a remade, lower poly version of the racers, karts, tracks, everything. Some minor things needed to be adjusted, like the way certain items work, but ultimately, this is the console game in miniature. And truthfully, I think it might be a little too much like the console game, at least in controls. It's very obvious these tracks and controls were designed for the home consoles, and it doesn't mesh fully with the Nintendo DS. Compare that to a game like Mario Kart DS, where the controls are tight and the courses were clearly designed around what the DS controls could handle, and I think Sonic and Sega All-Stars just lacks a little bit. But that's genuinely my only complaint, and it doesn't take away from my experience with this version of the game. Honestly, it's just surprising they got it on here. What isn't surprising is that they put this game also on iOS and Android. Sega was really one of the first out of the gate to put their games on mobile, and to this day they're still a pretty big player in the mobile game space. Sadly though, this version of the game has been taken down from the different storefronts, and while I tried to get an archived version up and running, I just couldn't. But from the footage that is out there, it seems like it's the same as the DS version, but with fewer characters and tracks, and touch and motion controls. I was, however, able to get another version of the game working, a Java version for teeny tiny cell phones. When you compare this version to the previous Java games found on phones, you can really tell that the technology made crazy leaps and bounds. Unlike all the other versions, this is a completely different version of the game, but it's fairly impressive what they were able to accomplish. There are other racers, boost and drift mechanics, and item boxes, all on a device that can hold exactly 3 MP3s. It's definitely in the lower tier of mobile game, where it's just something to mess around with in tiny bursts rather than something to be heavily invested in, but it's neat nonetheless. And the sprites are beautiful. I am such a sucker for good sprite work, and these really are just top notch. And I don't have an interesting transition, so... oh no. Sonic Free Riders was the third and final entry in the Rider series, developed for the Xbox 360 Kinect, so the game was entirely controlled through gestures you would do with your entire body in front of the camera peripheral. I don't have a ton of experience with Kinect games. In fact, outside of those demos that you might have seen in like a Walmart, I think this might have been my genuine first Kinect game. So I jumped into the tutorial and tried to learn the different gestures that it wanted from me, until I got to this part where you need to perform a spin. I, for the life of me, could not get this to work. I tried so many times, and Sonic would almost begin the move, then like bug out and decide not to do it. I'm not joking when I say I literally could not get past this part of the tutorial. I played 0 of the actual story because the game would not function. It's possible I was just losing my patience after playing a dozen or so Sonic racing games, but this one was just bad. Evidently, there's a mod that allows you to play the game with just a controller, and that sounds far more tolerable, but I will not be booting this game up again anytime soon. Now it's time for Peak. Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed is the sequel to the first game with way too many words in its title, and this is just a genuinely really good game. It takes everything good about the first one and just improves it. The big gimmick of this entry is that the vehicles have the ability to transform into boats and planes. This is something that kart racers love to do, starting all the way back with the success of Diddy Kong Racing. However, most kart racers that do this just put in the transformation without any real use for it. Sure, we might be boating or flying now, but the track is still literally just one path I'm required to follow. It's no different than using the karts. But that's not really the case with Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. When a section makes you transform, I feel like the track actually complements the different mechanics of the vehicle, and this is especially emphasized by actual track changes. Like, let's take a look at the Skies of Arcadia course, Rogue's Landing. It starts out as a standard race, but then in the second lap, cannonballs are being launched onto the track and destroying parts of it. By the third lap, the entire raceway is destroyed, and you complete the race up in the skies in this wide open area. That's such a cool idea for a track, and giving this little narrative explanation for the form change works so well. They really went all in on the character roster too. You know how people talk about Super Smash Kart, where Nintendo should just add all of their IPs into one kart racer? Well, that is literally this, but for Sega. You've got a ton of guys returning from the first game, and brand new characters from so many different games. There's even this sick throwback character, which uses the Hornet from Daytona USA for the car, an F-14 from Afterburner, and a whole ass Dreamcast controller as the boat. And then just for good measure, throw Wreck-It Ralph in there. As part of a deal with Disney to let Sonic and Eggman appear in the Wreck-It Ralph movie, Ralph himself appears as a racer in this game, which is so bizarre. But not as bizarre as a real-life race car driver, Danica Patrick, also being in the game, in an almost unbelievable collaboration between her, Hot Wheels, and GoDaddy. And then you've got several Steam-exclusive characters, including 3 characters in one from Team Fortress 2. Overall, I think this is the best Sonic racing game that Sega has ever made. It's just a genuinely fun and good game, and if they continued building upon this formula in a similar manner that Mario Kart does, I could see it being incredibly successful, so let's hope they keep doing that, huh? This game also dropped on the PlayStation Vita, and it runs In contrast to the Nintendo DS version, this is indeed just an incredibly quick and dirty port. It seemed like they saw the PS Vita was stronger than previous handhelds, so they went ahead and tried. The frame rate is bad, the game just overall looks incredibly unpolished, and it just feels awful to play. And that goes double for the 3DS version. I don't know who was insane enough to take a console as underpowered as the 3DS and try to port essentially an entire console game on it. They were so focused on whether they could that they didn't stop and think if they should. Also, for some reason, the minimap on the bottom just gets bored and goes off to do something else. This game was also on iOS and Android, and like its predecessor, is no longer available on the storefronts, which is a shame because I would have liked to see how poorly it compared to the Vita and 3DS versions. Since there are technically 2 versions of Sonic games that I wasn't able to play, let me see if I can make it up to you. I never said it would be good. Like I said before, Sega has been all in on mobile games, and one of their more interesting ventures has been putting Sonic in the auto-runner genre. Games like Temple Run and Subway Surfers exploded with popularity in the early 2010s, and big game studios really jumped on this genre as well. They have a regular Sonic one called Sonic Dash, and a sequel based on Sonic Boom. But then they took that auto-runner game, and they turned it into a racing game called Sonic Forces Speed Battle, Sonic Forces PvP Battle Race, Sonic Forces Run Battle Game. I have no idea what this game is actually called. And at any rate, there isn't very much to say about it. It's an auto-runner where you try to mess up the least. It's an interesting formula, I guess. But it's such a mobile game with so many microtransactions and watch an ad to get double rewards. So I'm gonna speed PvP Run Battle Game away from this one. 2019 saw the release of a new racing game, Team Sonic Racing. This game removes the All-Stars and only keeps the Sonic characters. And in my opinion, this is a complete step backwards. Half the fun of the last 2 games was the crossover aspect and having racers, items, characters, all from different game series. The developers of this one intentionally wanted to focus on the Sonic series and take advantage of its full suite of characters and elements. And that would be fine, except they just didn't do that. When I hear taking advantage of the full Sonic universe, I'm thinking we're gonna see obscure characters like Fang the Hunter or Bean the Dynamite. Instead, we have exactly who you would expect, which makes for a pretty lackluster roster. Honestly, the only interesting character is the 4-in-1 Chow Racer. The whole game just feels super generic. The tracks are all Sonic themed, and they're fine, but they're nothing all too spectacular either, especially when we've seen a handful of them before. On top of that, all of the items in the game are just wisps, which is so boring to me. Sure, it gives like an in-universe reason for these items to work like they do, but I'm not looking for canonical consistency in a kart racing game. The controls are top-notch, but that's because they're carried over from All-Stars Transformed. They also got rid of flight and boat sections, which is sort of a disappointment, but I also can be satisfied with only kart racing if it's a fun enough time. I will say the game does innovate in some pretty interesting ways. The whole focus is on teams, with 3 racers working together. You can give benefits to your teammates on the racetrack, like giving them an extra speed boost by driving near them or using the slingshot maneuver. The most interesting is the item transfer, where you can request or offer up an item and another teammate can toss theirs to you. There's also an ultimate meter, which replaces all-star moves. All 3 teammates work to fill the meter, and when activated, all 3 teammates get the bonus. And it's sadly just a generic speed up, flashing white type of thing. I respect them for going for some different mechanics in team battles, and honestly, they're pretty neat. It's just not enough to get me all that invested in the game. Like I said, this feels like just a step back. It seems like they could have just continued with the Sonic and All-Stars formula, and while they kept the gameplay in many ways, it's just kind of worse. And they didn't even really take that much advantage of the Sonic universe. But actually, it has gambling, so all is forgiven. But you know, I just kinda wish I had this game on my phone. As part of Sega's partnership with Apple, they put a form of this game on Apple Arcade. It's kinda weird because it's like a promotion for Team Sonic Racing, but it also kind of replaces that game in a way too. The gameplay is quite literally just Team Sonic Racing, but on mobile. There's team synergies, unlockable characters, and customizable vehicles. There are some slight differences in things like unlockables, but this is pretty much the same game. I'm kinda curious why they dropped the team for this one and just called it Sonic Racing. I get it's probably to make them legally distinct, but the games are so close already that I honestly think they could have just straight up said, this is the mobile version of Team Sonic Racing. I don't know, it's kinda weird. But Sega really seemed to hear the complaints with this one, because next they released Sonic Racing CrossWorlds feels like a proper sequel to the All-Star games. Hearing the fan complaints about lack of crossovers, they essentially went all in this time. Naturally, the game features Sonic characters, but we have a much larger roster compared to Team Sonic Racing. But they also included quite a few guest characters. Now, some of these are not all that surprising. Joker from Persona 5, Ichiban from Yakuza, Hatsune Miku, but then you've got some wild ones. Steve, Alex, and the Creeper from Minecraft, SpongeBob and Patrick, Pac-Man and the Ghosts, Mega Man and Proto Man, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Avatar? There are also free characters on the way. Ai, Knights, and Tangle and Whisper, 2 characters from the Sonic comics. People always said Nintendo should be the one to make Super Smash Kart, but Sega kinda just stole that idea and did it themselves. And they definitely want this to be a game that you regularly return to. The game has routine festivals, events where players are divided into teams and race with different rules, earning points to go towards cosmetics. But the crossover aspect doesn't just stop at the character choice. As you might guess by the name of CrossWorlds, each race involves teleporting off of one track and onto another. So you start on a main track, and then you're able to jump to any of the CrossWorlds tracks for your second lap. And then you return to the main track again, except now it's altered in some way. Apparently, this concept of traveling through the rings to another location was actually inspired by the Sonic movie, where the rings are used as portals. Honestly, I really love this idea. Not only because it leans into the crossover aspect, but it really mixes up the races, and each one truly feels like it's brand new. The game also aims to celebrate all of the past Sonic racing games. Not only can you race in a car, but the extreme gear from the Riders games returns, so you can use that hoverboard to your heart's content. There's also a whole gadget system introduced in CrossWorlds, and I'm of two minds about this mechanic. On the one hand, it's very cool that you can change up how you race. You can enhance certain stats, prefer certain items, change how and when you get rings. There's a lot of options here. But the downside is it takes you a long time to unlock all of these gadgets. So until you have a wider selection, it feels like you're at a severe disadvantage compared to other players simply because they've put more time into the game. You do start to get them pretty quickly, so it softens the blow a little bit, but it does sort of suck when you're first starting out. Frankly, I'm thrilled that they saw where they goofed with Team Sonic Racing, listened to the fan feedback, and then gave us what we truly wanted. The fact that SpongeBob can interact with Miku, that's just icing on the cake. And ultimately, my favorite part is that I can finally race as Sonic the Werehog. And as a Sonic Unleashed truther, I've never been happier. There are a couple of weird Sonic games where they could be considered racing games if you wanted to be pedantic. There's the kart racing mode in Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, it is a kart racing minigame, but is it really? Sonic Racing Shift Up is technically a racing game, but the whole point is to shift gears as fast as possible in order to defeat Shadow. You're not controlling the kart or interacting with other racers, it's just a gear shift simulator TM. Oh, and this one is also lost media. Sonic Rumble is another game that's kinda hard to place. Certainly it's a race against other players, but it's also not exactly what you think of when you think of racing games. It's a battle royale, obstacle course, race, so it's kinda three things in one. But also, I doubt it will have Among Us, so what's even the point? And this isn't even considering the fan efforts. An open source fan game called Sonic Roboblast 2 set out to create classic Sonic levels in 3D, but they also created a side mode that recreated the Sonic Riders gameplay. And then that side mode received a Mario Kart inspired mode. And then that ended up being its own whole game called Sonic Roboblast 2 Kart. So that's a spin-off fan game based on a mode of a mode in a fan game that was all incidentally built on the source code of Doom. That's a wild family tree. But I had to play a lot of crap to get to where I am today. And so now, I have to take my revenge. Picture this. You enter the gaming console market and against all the odds, absolutely dominate. But your competitors all have their own mascots, cute little guys that go hand in hand with selling their console. And you have not a mascot. So what do? When creating the PlayStation 1, Sony was far more concerned with getting the hardware developed than they were with developing games. Sure, there was some in-house development, but most of the time, Sony took a look at what was being developed and went ahead and published some of the heavier hitters. And there was one guy that far and away became synonymous with the PlayStation: Crash Bandicoot. Sony published all of his games during the PS1 era and positioned him as their Mario, even having commercials where he was talking shit at the Nintendo headquarters. And when you have that popular and recognizable mascot, what do you do with him? Put him in a Mario Kart clone. Crash's developer Naughty Dog actually crafted a kart racer with the intention of it being an original property. After pitching it though, Sony agreed to publish the game only if it was developed into a Crash game, and Naughty Dog agreed, and so Crash Team Racing was born. Like other Mario Kart clones, CTR focuses on the wackiness that Mario Kart pioneered. Unusual tracks, wacky items, a load of characters, and multiplayer fun. Unlike other Mario Kart clones, CTR was in a unique scenario. Mario Kart wasn't on the PlayStation, so there was easily a gap to be filled. And believe me, people were trying to fill that gap. But Crash also had the star power to really move copies of the game. In the 90s, he was unbelievably popular, so making a kart racer through the Crash lens just worked. And the most important distinction from other Mario Kart clones? This game is actually f***ing good. It wasn't a quick and dirty cash grab, just throwing a character and a kart into a blender. They first and foremost wanted to make a good game. It's always a risk making one of these games because Mario Kart just sets the standard. If you're too much like Mario Kart, why bother playing the game when you can just play Mario Kart? But if you're too different, what the hell, why isn't this like Mario Kart? CTR toes this line perfectly. It's just similar enough to Mario Kart while deviating in ways that actually improve the experience, like the controls. This game feels way better to drive in than Mario Kart 64. That game feels a little too slippery, like one wrong move and you're flying away. In CTR, when I'm hopping, drifting, maneuvering through tight turns, I just feel like anytime I mess up, it's usually because it's my fault. Speaking of hopping and drifting, CTR implements different mechanics to these abilities that are tough to learn, but so satisfying to master. When hopping off a slope or ramp, the amount of time you hang in the air translates to a boost when you hit the ground. The more air time, the bigger your boost. This makes hilly areas not just an experience. If you can time your hops well, you end up zooming through these sections. Hopping on your own also sends you pretty high, and there are some sections where only a well-timed jump can get you to a shortcut. Drifting is about what you'd expect in the game, but the boost you can gain from a drift is another thing that's pretty technical. While drifting using one of the shoulder buttons, you need to time a press of the opposite shoulder button to gain a boost, pressing it either when the smoke behind you turns black or when your meter in the corner turns red. And you can do this up to 3 times off of a single drift. These driving mechanics have quite a learning curve to them when you're first starting out, but once you've built up the muscle memory and the skill and you sort of learn the tracks, they really open up your freedom. Hopping to a shortcut, chaining drift boosts together, it all makes for such a satisfying gameplay experience. Items work a bit differently than in Mario Kart 2. You've got the staples, the beaker is like a banana, the missile's like a red shell, and there's a shield, boost, and invincibility. But there are also a few unique ones. The bombs are sort of like green shells that loosely head towards other racers, but you can press the item button again to prematurely detonate it. Then there are the TNT crates, which when hit by a racer will begin a countdown. If you can hop enough before the timer hits 0, it'll remove the TNT from you, but otherwise... CTR also combines these items with their own version of coins, the Wumpa Fruit, to make a sort of upgrade system. Collecting Wumpa Fruit will increase your top speed, with 10 being the maximum. But when you're holding 10 Wumpa Fruit, all of your items are now upgraded into a better version. The beaker goes from green to red, and if a player is hit by it, they not only crash, but also become slower for a bit. The TNT crate becomes a nitro crate, and none of that hopping nonsense applies. It just fully explodes on contact. I like that this mechanic gives a purpose to the Wumpa Fruit. Obviously, they grant the buff to your speed, but that's something that's really hard to notice unless you're looking at a side-by-side comparison. The item upgrade thing, though, is a very noticeable effect, giving you a far more compelling reason to grab Wumpa Fruit, in my opinion. But to me, CTR's big claim to fame has always been its adventure mode. Of all the kart racers of this era, the two that often stand out are Crash Team Racing and Diddy Kong Racing, both because of their excellent adventure modes. The developers of CTR actually took Diddy Kong Racing's Crescent Island track and recreated it in their engine to see how the PlayStation could handle a course of that size and scope and determine what their limitations could be by comparison. In the story, a big bad alien guy named Nitrous Oxide threatens the Earth and wants to defeat the fastest racer. So you go through a bunch of races, defeat some bosses, and then save the day. But even aside from directly using a Diddy Kong Racing track, it's clear that CTR's adventure mode was inspired by that game. There's a hub world you drive around to get to different tracks, and these track portals offer different types of matches. You have regular races, but there are also relic races and CTR coins to collect. To collect the relics, you need to complete a time trial in the fastest time possible, using time crates that will pause your time for a range of seconds. You can get sapphire, gold, or platinum relics depending on how quickly you do this. Collecting all of the platinum relics lets you take on Oxide again for an alternate ending. CTR tokens are collected by collecting the letters C, T, and R hidden around a racetrack and finishing first in the race. There are different colored tokens, and the exception to the rule is the purple tokens, which are done by collecting all of the crystals in the crystal bonus rounds. Collecting 4 of the same color token unlocks a gem cup, and winning the gem cup unlocks certain characters. Or you could just skip all of this and do like I did and enter a cheat code on the menu and get them all. It's kind of crazy that this was the first Crash kart racing game because it just nails almost everything. It's just that good. Even Nintendo needed a couple tries to really figure out everything for Mario Kart. But on the other hand, Naughty Dog did make CTR later, so they had more time to scope the competition and really see what worked and what didn't. The movement and drifting, the item play, the world and aesthetic and humor that Crash offers. Not to mention playing it on a way better controller than the N64, all of this comes together to make a fantastic game. And at the time, there were high hopes for the future of Crash as a gaming icon. And you can't forget my favorite mode, the Spyro 2 demo hidden behind a button combo. Moving into the PlayStation 2 generation, some legal nonsense took place that resulted in Crash no longer being exclusive to the Sony platform. Universal Interactive merged with Vivendi Games, and all home console games moving forward would generally be released not only on the PlayStation 2, but the Xbox and GameCube as well. And unsurprisingly, a sequel to Crash Team Racing was created shortly after, Crash Nitro Kart. Despite being developed by a completely different studio, now in the hands of Vicarious Visions, this game truly feels like it was made to just be CTR2, which makes sense as that was the working title during development. It has the same driving and item mechanics, and the art style really captures the spirit of CTR, but taken to the next level thanks to the improved hardware of this generation. But they also weren't afraid to take some risks and come up with some new ideas. Multiplier crates can now be found on a track, which gives you 3 of an item at once. But the downside is they're out of the way or on hard to navigate sections of the track, so there's a decent level of risk versus reward there. We also have exclamation mark crates, which when activated will cause something to happen on the track. Sometimes it's a shortcut, sometimes it's a big hazard that gets in your way. Also, I didn't know it until I played this game recently, but Crash Nitro Kart did the anti-gravity thing a decade before Mario Kart 8, even down to the tires rotating to keep you afloat. Now, of course, it's far more inelegant, but I was amazed to find this out nonetheless. The game's adventure mode is very strong as well, being about the same as CTR. A different big evil alien is here, kidnapping the gang and forcing them to race for his people's entertainment. This time you get to play on teams, with 3 characters on each team, allowing you to swap between them during the game. This is a nice addition, as in CTR, the character you picked for adventure mode was the character you were stuck with for the entire playthrough. The team aspect also plays a role in the new team race mode, which is what the adventure mode largely consists of. When you and a teammate are nearby, a meter will begin to charge. When full, you can activate Team Frenzy, which grants both of you the ability to use unlimited items for a short while, and this is absolutely busted. Just smashing the circle button and using any and all items you can is such a fun feeling, even if it is completely broken. Sadly, Nitro Kart just doesn't beat the original. The handling and control of your kart in this game just isn't as good as in CTR. It doesn't feel as responsive, you find yourself bonking into walls way more often, and at one point in the hub world, you can just get stuck on an anti-gravity slope. It's absolutely a solid attempt at making a sequel, especially given that it was a completely different team at the helm, and it's still a good time, but this is just a rare case where the first one was simply that good. It's hard to compete. But what if I want to drive a car while I'm driving a car? Crash Nitro Kart was in that era where developers would make 9 different games for 9 different platforms and call them all the same thing. So we got Crash Nitro Kart for the Game Boy Advance. Unsurprisingly, this is pretty different from the console version, but the difference is about as good as Mario Kart 64 versus Super Circuit. Hardware limitations aside, it's a surprisingly good conversion into a 2D screen the size of a thimble. Even the courses are all as close as possible to the console version. Naturally, it's all done in the pseudo 3D that was common with the Game Boy Advance, but for the most part, the track layouts end up being close, if not identical, to their Big Boy counterparts. The drift and boost mechanic was also implemented, but but I kinda hate it here. The GBA's limited buttons made them move around some of the functions. The item button is on the left trigger, which feels more natural than the PS2 circle button, but that means we can't use that for the drift boost. Instead, we have to start the drift, lift our finger off the A button, then press it again. And this just doesn't feel intuitive at all. But on the plus side, I ended up not really using the drifting and boosting, and I still performed just fine in most of the races. But most impressive, they managed to squeeze the adventure mode, hub worlds and all, into this version, which is pretty shocking for the damn Game Boy Advance. Like, they had no real need to do this. The adventure mode could have easily been streamlined to just basic menus and races, but they went for the true experience, and it kinda worked. The final boss can fuck right off though. He literally cheats, rubber banding ahead of you constantly. I had the lead in the final stretch of the race once, just for him to speed ahead and beat me by literally 0.3 seconds. And then the next race he did it again and beat me by 0.2. Surprisingly, this game also has content that doesn't exist in the console version, namely the big bad bosses. None of the bosses can be unlocked as normal racers on the console game, but here on GBA, they are all playable simply by defeating them in the adventure mode. Oh, and Spyro is here too. Crash and Spyro were often associated together, both being icons of the PlayStation 1. And at this point, they were both owned by the same company, making this Game Boy Advance conversion of a racing game technically the first time Spyro and Crash ever appeared side by side. But now let's say I want to play this game on a handheld that I can also immediately use to report somebody to the authorities. The Nokia N-Gage was a weird little experiment. The phone company Nokia wanted to break into the handheld gaming market by offering a device that could still function as a cell phone. It did not go well. Both the original model and the N-Gage QD failed to make a dent in any meaningful way, which is kind of funny because it was almost ahead of its time with how big mobile games became just a few short years later. But come on, would you want to play a game on this thing? Despite being a commercial failure, the N-Gage saw over 50 physical games released for the platform, one of which was a version of Crash Nitro Kart. And miraculously, this is a full version of the game, just like the Game Boy Advance version was, which is both impressive and horrible. They somehow managed to include the full adventure mode with the hub worlds and all of the characters and features into this dinky-ass toy. The screen size on this thing is pitiful. It's like half of what the Game Boy Advance has, and that version already felt like it was too small. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be a problem by default if you developed around this limitation, but your character is always so close to the camera that the amount of track you can see at any given time is just not enough. Pair that with slippery controls and the actual track and background moving quite a bit, and it can actually be pretty dizzying trying to play this game. And even without the motion sickness, it's just so easy to lose track of where you are because of how aggressively everything moves around. Fortunately, they knew you were going to run into a bunch of stuff, so they compensated for that by making the CPUs stupid baby easy, that you can just catch up to them in no time. The tracks were also not designed specifically around the N-Gage, which is strange because they were all completely redone from scratch for the N-Gage version. While the layouts are all the same as the GBA games, the N-Gage tracks are all actually in 3D, including slopes and the airtime boost mechanic. And at that rate, if you're remaking the tracks anyway, why not make some tweaks to better fit this version of the game? And man, the controls on this thing are so bad. And okay, this isn't strictly a Crash problem. Pretty much every N-Gage game suffered because playing on a numpad like this just does not work. But it is also kind of a problem with the game. You have to hold 5 to accelerate, press 2 to drift, and press 4 to use an item. I feel like I'm one weird finger slip away from accidentally dialing the SWAT
Get your
team.
hands in the air! Drop your weapon! You're under arrest!
But one mildly neat thing that this version did is offer online play. Kinda. I mean, it's just a time trial leaderboard, but on a damn taco shell with T9 texting, even the bare minimum is impressive. And if you thought we were done with Crash Nitro Kart conversions, you were almost right. Not only did they make a version for this special cell phone, they made versions for all kinds of cell phones too. This is the kind of phone game that we were used to in the mid-2000s. Something popped out in an afternoon just to be able to say you had a mobile game, but really it's nothing all that interesting. It wasn't really designed to be played for extended periods. It was purely just something for your thumbs to do for minutes of gameplay at a time. We were really in the trenches. Everybody laugh at the old man. So now we get to move on to the next proper entry in the Crash Racing series. This is Crash Tag Team Racing, and I cannot wait to jump in and get my hands behind the wheel of a car once more. What the hell is this? Crash Tag Team Racing is such a freak of a game. It's like the developers didn't know what game they wanted to make. It's half kart racer, half platformer, half minigame collection. In the adventure mode, you explore the Motor World theme park, traveling from world to world collecting power crystals. You can sometimes find these in the platforming areas, or by playing minigames scattered throughout the world. But the main way is by completing these driving levels. Eventually, you get enough crystals to unlock the jump pad, grab the area's gem, unlock the next part of the park, and rinse and repeat until the game is finished. The platforming is kinda lame. Crash and the camera don't really control all that great, and anyway, I didn't buy a racing game to play a platformer. And the mini-games are pretty boring. They're almost all just different reskins of a shooting minigame, only having vaguely different goals. Oh, except for bowling, that one rules. But even the racing parts of the game suck. They completely abandoned the whole driving system from CTR and Nitro Kart. Instead of go-karts, you actually drive big giant cars, which on its face isn't that big of a deal. But the whole gimmick of this game is this clash mechanic. If you activate this ability and run into another vehicle, the two of you merge cars and become one racer. One person drives and one person shoots out of a giant turret on the back. And this is just not interesting gameplay. If you're in control of the turret, your sole job is to just point and shoot at the other cars until you're out of ammo. You're experiencing none of the driving, and worse yet, you don't really get to appreciate any of the track design or ambience or anything because you're just shooting. But if you're driving, you're basically just driving. You don't get to have fun with item play in any meaningful way because half of the other drivers are being hit by your teammate. So the moments where using an item would make any kind of difference is fairly rare. It's like you're experiencing only half of the game when you're engaging in its core mechanic, and that just sucks. I think the mechanic itself is interesting, and it probably works really well in multiplayer scenarios, but it just lasts way too long in the single player, and you kinda just end up going on autopilot. Apparently, this game was pretty rushed, which, yeah, you can tell. Like for instance, the ending. You get enough crystals, you get to the last area, the final cutscene plays, and there isn't a big final boss or a big race, you're just done. But on the plus side, Dolly Parton is technically canon to the Crash Bandicoot universe.
I knew I should have got a job at Dollywood instead.
And unsurprisingly, Crash Tag Team Racing not only had a console release, but a handheld release as well on the PSP. This is literally the console game. Okay, literally the console game. The PSP was famous for having handheld ports of console games, but it was also a coin toss whether you were going to get a totally different game that just had the same name, or a scaled-down version of the console game with some minor changes. And in this case, you pretty much got the same game. There was actually some exclusive content in both versions. Some exclusive cars and arenas, and each version actually has an exclusive mode. But if you connect the PS2 and the PSP to one another, you can unlock all of that content found in the opposite version. Being on a handheld really doesn't save this game from just being mediocre. Just because I can now play it portably doesn't mean the game is any more fun. I'm just having a miserable time on the bus. And apparently, a Nintendo DS version of Tag Team Racing was in development as well, and got pretty far along. But around the time they planned to release it, Mario Kart DS was scheduled to drop, and they figured they couldn't compete with that game, so they just canned the whole thing. Kinda crazy to just completely axe a near-finished project simply because there's other competition. But there were also members of the development team that said there were some internal issues with the various companies involved, so that actually kinda makes a lot more sense. Images of development assets were posted online in 2014, but no playable build of the game or any gameplay of the DS version has ever been seen. Wait, did you think we were done with cell phones? No, get ready because they really wanted Crash to work on mobile. First, we've got a not port of not Crash Tag Team Racing that was released in 2005, a game simply called Crash Racing, but it uses the art, characters, and elements all found in Tag Team Racing. And despite dropping the tag team part of the name, you can in fact perform clashes, which increases your speed and allows you to shoot projectiles. I just got nothing to say about this one. I would call this something for my thumbs to do too, but even that's a stretch. This one really feels like left and right simulator for the Nokia family of cell phones. Only thing I can do is hope that an emergency happens to take me away from this game. Oh, thank God. After a few years, they wanted to give it another go. but they took a really interesting approach. In the time since the previous game, phones were experiencing a revolution. The iPhone had come out, completely changing the standards for smartphones. Other companies were figuring out what to do. Some were going the iPhone route, while others were doing their best to improve their more traditional cell phones. Regardless, all cell phones were becoming so much better. And with Apple releasing their App Store, where you can download apps and games, a whole new market was opening up. Because of these two factions of phone types, Vivendi Games didn't want to leave any market untouched. So they contracted 2 different studios to create a new Crash racing game for each platform. On more traditional phones, they released Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart, which then for some reason got a name change to Crash Nitro Kart 2. On iPhone and other higher tier phones, the title that released was instead Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D, and What is that?! Yeah, it's bad enough that they were using this awful redesign of Crash Bandicoot for this game, but they truly put like 19 seconds into modeling the characters. Like, this is supposed to be Ripper-Roo? The 2D game falls pretty much in line with the previous mobile kart racers, though I think it's probably the best of the bunch, with better hardware and kinda just giving more of a shit. The developers actually made a game that you enjoy playing. The 3D version is sort of like a watered-down version of the console games, with forced motion controls if you were on iPhone, because that was the cool thing to do in those days. It's kind of amazing that despite the incredible difference in art style, control, and even just straight-up gameplay, these 2 games are also pretty similar. The story's the same, the missions performed are exactly the same, but naturally there are many differences too. Both versions have a shared roster, but they each also get 2 exclusive characters. The items are also somewhat different. The 3D version has all the items you'd expect from a console Crash kart racer, while the 2D version has stuff that works a little better for this limited gameplay. There are tire spikes that pop the tires of anyone who bumps you, a remote control crash car that works like a blue shell, a black hole that spawns a Looney Tunes hole ahead on the track, and even a flying cart item. Both games also have crash letters scattered about. While collecting all of these in a race simply unlocks a new character in 3D, in 2D you instead activate
Monster Truck Mode,
souping up your car and giving you speed and invincibility so you can crush all other racers. As a pair, these 2 games are just so interesting. Releasing versions on both, making sure there was some unity across both, and above all, finally making a halfway decent kart racer for mobile. I mean, it could never beat the proper console games, but they truly gave it a decent try, especially for 2008. But could you imagine playing this on an actual console with an actual controller? The Zeebo was a game console created particularly for regions that didn't really have much of a gaming market. Where piracy and bootlegs ran rampant, such as China, Russia, and South America, Zeebo was supposed to be the answer. My hero. It was designed to bring mobile and older console games to these new markets in a cheap way. They aren't able to get fancy modern games in these regions, they get Zeebo. This console was a colossal failure, but before it could crash and burn, Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D was ported over to it. Wow. Taking a passable mobile game and putting it on a console without really doing any kind of touch-up to make it enjoyable in that new medium, this one's rough. The controls are just awful, and the gameplay, while fine for a mobile game, does not fly for a full console game. There are kids out there with their opinion of kart racers and Crash Bandicoot firmly established because of Crash Zeebo Kart, and to them, I just want to say, I'm so sorry. The greatest sin is that the models are exactly as they look on the mobile versions. And when you aren't playing on this tiny phone screen actually moving it around side to side, but instead you're playing it on a static big TV, someone please put him out of his misery. And the mobile games don't stop there. A sequel to Nitro Kart 3D was released in 2010, Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2. Not to be confused with Crash Nitro Kart 2, which was originally named Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart, which is different from Crash Nitro Kart. Why the hell did they do this? Once again, this game is pretty competent, essentially playing the same as Nitro Kart 3D, but with one huge plus. You can turn off motion controls and just control it with a little slider down in the corner. It's nice to have the option, but I think the whole accelerometer novelty wore off pretty quickly, so I'm glad that you can just control the game more directly. But the surprising thing with this game is the amount of stuff you can do. Grand Prix Cups, Time Trial, and Mission Mode are all back, but then there are several more modes that change up the goal of each race and really give you more variety. But perhaps most ambitious is that this game had online multiplayer, and not just half-assed time trial stuff that they had in the past. You could host and join online rooms and play across all of the modes that the game offered. It's really not all that surprising based on today's standards, but this was 2010. Our phones still had home buttons. This was impressive. Oh, and they went back to the classic designs, which look leagues better than that. Seriously, it's like the models got corrupted at the last second and they just shipped it anyway. This game was the final straw for the Crash series for a while. It might not have been the direct cause, Crash was certainly on a decline for a while, but it was the final game to release before the series fell dormant. But behind the scenes, plans for a reboot were taking place following the merger of Vivendi with Activision to create Activision Blizzard. A traditional Crash game called Crash Landed was in the works, and alongside it, a proper new Crash racing game, simply titled Crash Team Racing. We've got some footage that survived today, but sadly, Activision trashed these projects and laid off both teams working on these games. But the good news is you can sort of play this game today. The work done on Crash Team Racing was reworked into a different kart racer. DreamWorks Superstar Karts brings together several of DreamWorks' iconic movie properties into a big kart racer. And honestly, they don't have a horrible lineup. Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Madagascar, Monsters vs. Aliens, these are all fantastic movies that have become huge brands, so it's no surprise that they went for this. But man, this game is dog shit. And if it's reflective of what the Crash reboot was going to be, then thank God. This game is so clunky and jarring. One second I'm speeding along and I feel like I have great control. The next I slow to a crawl and I'm bumping into invisible walls. They also did this thing with the drifting where rather than using it to cut tight corners and earn a boost along the way, you swing way out and essentially build up energy, then release and go blasting forward. This takes all the joy out of drifting, especially when it seems like you have to hit a drift to be able to make some of these turns successfully. But the drift isn't good enough to even make that turn. Every character does get a fun super move though, like Shrek with his roar or Donkey with his child labor. It wouldn't be until 2017 that after a 6-year hiatus, Crash would return with the Crash and Sane trilogy, a gorgeous remake of the first 3 Crash games. This collection performed insanely well, inspiring not only a similar Spyro remake collection, but also a complete remake of CTR, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. This remake effectively brings the game into the modern age. Upgraded visuals, tweaked controls, and overall just an insane level of polish. Side-by-side comparisons of the original and remake are insane to look at. Like it's a real testament to how much graphics have evolved in just a few short decades. The game also plays just like the original. Some physics things have changed, so of course it's not an exact copy. There was a lot of tweaking that happened, but genuinely it just feels so good to play this game. Not only do all of the tracks from the original return, but so does Adventure Mode, with some really nice quality of life enhancements. You can play in Classic Mode, exactly how the original played, or Nitro Fueled, which offers different difficulty levels and allows you to change your character and kart at any time, which is fantastic. The original is obviously great, but it does get a little stale playing as your one single character for the entire game. But Nitro Fueled doesn't just stop at being a CTR remake. This game is chock full of content from both Crash Nitro Kart and Tag Team Racing. Racers, tracks, and karts all from the later games are included. It evolved into this bizarre but really wonderful fusion of all the different games. And this game also got insane levels of post-launch support as well. Not only do we get all of this returning content from the previous games, but all new stuff was constantly being added in. Characters had skins in the base game, but would regularly receive new skins that were purchasable using Wumpa coins in the rotating item shop. They also held periodic Grand Prix events, which all followed a general theme and each introduced a brand new track. New racers, karts, skins, all completely for free. These packs range from girly pops to returning bad guys, and of course, Spyro the Dragon. They even had some PlayStation exclusive stuff, like retro skins and a whole PlayStation themed track. The game stopped receiving updates in 2020, but to this day, you can earn all of the content the game has to offer. It may be a little annoying since you're confined to whatever the item shop offers on any given day, but it's pretty remarkable that you could buy this game for the first time in 2025 and still be able to enjoy all of the game's content with a little perseverance or money. Nitro Fueled was really the perfect remake. The developers knew what people loved about the first one, and they knew that while the others fell a little flat, there were also good elements there that they could incorporate as well. What started out as a remake of the first game sort of evolved into a celebration of Crash's kart racing history, minus the N-Gage stuff. Despite all of the lows, I still can't help but look at Crash racing games with fondness. They just did so well on their first attempt that almost all of the sequels were doomed from the start because they couldn't match the quality of Crash Team Racing. At least until they just made that game all over again. But still, almost every Crash racing game has some fun to be had. Even if it's not the best in the series, each one, at least a little bit, is worth checking out. And we're not even close to covering every game. So now it's time for the lightning round. Digimon Racing has a really cool evolution mechanic where you can power up and use that energy as your item, but you power back down and need to build that meter back up to digivolve again. Smurf Racer is a painful kart racer for PS1. There isn't a ton of track variety, there are only 3 types of items, and who out there was demanding a Smurf racing game? Apparently a lot of people, because Smurf's Kart also exists, and for some reason, looks gorgeous. Angry Birds also had a kart racer for mobile, but only the early versions are good. Version 2 made the game far more mobile game grindy, which ruined it, and then it got taken off of the app stores anyway. Skylanders had a whole racing themed game, but on the less powerful 3DS and Wii, they literally just made it a kart racer with nothing else in it. Mortal Kombat had a racing side mode called Motor Combat where characters used their special moves instead of items. M&M's even got their own kart racing game, and it's absolute dog shit. And so did Goldfish. Burger King released a racing game, but on motorbikes. There was one for South Park. Crazy Frog had a racing game, and it's kind of good, and it had a Game Boy Advance and DS port, and it got a sequel. Alright, surely after all of that, I have to be done. There can't be any more kart racers.